Call this regular council meeting for the town of Fort Erie to order. We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we all gather collectively in our separate spaces is land on which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Anishinaabe people. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present, Your Worship.
Thank you. We do have an addendum this evening. Mr. Art King, President of the Fort Erie SPCA, will be appearing as a delegate. That's under item 8. And just some very brief announcements. Last week was the annual Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference. The last several years it's been held in Ottawa, but this year it was held because of COVID-19 completely virtually. And the town of Fort Erie participated in the signing of an agreement between the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres. And that piggybacked on work that we've been doing in Fort Erie with our own Fort Erie Native Friendship Centre, with which the town of Fort Erie has a strategic alliance. And Jennifer Dockstader, the executive director of our local friendship centre, did speak at AMO and provided some very interesting background to where we are as a society and where we can go as a society. And we have some great opportunities here in Fort Erie in particular to work with our Indigenous community to make a better Fort Erie for everyone. During the course of the week, we had some meetings with the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Tourism, the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Infrastructure, and the Minister of Long-Term Care. Councillors McDermott and Dubanow, along with our CAO, Tom Cookett, met with those individuals, provided some background with respect to the town of Fort Erie. The main items that we brought to their attention, aside from giving some context about the town of Fort Erie, for tourism and infrastructure, was to talk about the opportunity at the Niagara River Marina, owned by the Niagara Parks Commission, talked about that and some of the things that we would require to move that forward. Also spoke about opportunities for the town of Fort Erie and our Indigenous community to highlight the history and heritage of our First Nations here in this place. And I'm advised by Jennifer Dockstader that they have information and they have some records that would, not records, but artifacts that would go back as far as 13,000 years, which is far further back than I had anticipated. That was of great interest to the Parliamentary Assistant of Tourism. And when we spoke about infrastructure, we talked about the importance of broadband and the need for rural communities or rural areas within municipalities like Fort Erie to have broadband, because it's now an essential service. And we talked about the work that we've been doing with some of through our economic development services with the providers and the efforts that we have made and the importance to our community to be connected, both internally but externally. And then finally, with respect to the Minister of Long-Term Care, we talked about the things that the town of Fort Erie has done to provide access to healthcare services to our residents. And I'm confident that Fort Erie is the leading lower tier municipality in terms of initiatives and money that it has expended in order to ensure that our residents have access to the services that they need and that they deserve. The minister was quite impressed, and we talked about, of course, the long-term care build by the region, the new Gilmore Lodge, and she was familiar with that. We had an opportunity to provide her with some interesting background on that. And I also had an opportunity to meet with her the following day with the regional delegation, which was made up of Chair Bradley, Mayor Senzik from St. Catharines, and a couple of staff members. And again, she was quite impressed. So those things, those projects are on schedule and they're moving forward. And that's all good news for the town of Fort Erie. I wanted to point out that on this evening's agenda, we have a resolution to support the region of Niagara joining the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. And we will be signing on behalf of the town of Fort Erie if the resolution is passed, and I presume that will be. We will be signing the declaration that outlines the commitments that are being made by municipalities that are joining this coalition of inclusive municipalities. That's important as well because currently there is some work that's going on that was started a couple of months ago by some members of our municipality to create a citizens coalition for inclusion and diversity, the objective of which will be to provide information to the mayor and council, to assist us when we develop policies, and to keep an eye on the significance and the importance and initiatives that we can engage in to make this a welcoming, caring, inclusive community, and to take advantage of the diversity that we have here. And finally, I wanted to mention that on Sunday, August the 30th, I was alerted to, and I've shared this now with senior staff, to the fact that a young lady whose 14th birthday happens to be on Sunday, August the 30th, will be swimming across Lake Erie. She lives in southwestern Ontario. She's going to be taken to Sturgeon Falls on the American side of Lake Erie, and her intention is to swim across the lake about 20 kilometers to Crystal Beach. And so she anticipates that could take anywhere from 6.5 to 8 hours or thereabouts. But her name is Julia. She's raising money for cancer research. And I would urge you to go to the website. I will circulate to members of council the email that I received. And it's a swim that is unique because she will be, if she is successful, the youngest person ever to swim across Lake Erie. So we wish her well, and I know that if possible, I'll be available to greet her, along with, I understand, MP Vance Badaway also wishes to be there. So it's pretty impressive. We had a swim across Lake Erie several years ago. It was a young woman with a disability, but she was able to cross the lake. It took many, many hours longer than she anticipated, but it was a phenomenal feat and accomplishment by someone who was simply determined to complete the task that she had set for herself. So hopefully Julia will be successful, and we'll have something to celebrate next Sunday evening. So those are the announcements. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have to declare a conflict with motion 13A on the agenda, SPCA and Animal Control, as the company I work for performs contracted services for the SPCA, and I will also be declaring a conflict on the presentation this evening as well, listed as 9B on the addendum by Art King, the president of the Fort Erie SPCA, for the same reason.
Okay. Are there any other disclosures of pecuniary interest? If there aren't, then there are some upcoming public meetings. We're going to be doing some Zoom meetings with respect to the Planning Act. And so on Monday, August the 31st, a week from tonight at 6 p.m., we will be doing draft plan of subdivision and combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, which will be the second public meeting for this particular developed proposal. It's Royal Ridge Phase 2, and the information report for that video conference will be available Thursday, August the 27th, 2020. The same evening, August 31st, 2020, we will be doing a zoning bylaw amendment for a small parcel on Burley Road owned by the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation, St. Catharines. And again, the information report for that will be available August the 27th. There's also a zoning bylaw amendment public meeting scheduled for September the 2nd, 2020. And that relates to the parcel of land that borders Town Line Road, Netherby Road, and the Queen Elizabeth Highway, or at least a portion of that. And that's owned by 550075 Ontario Limited. And again, the information report for that public meeting will be available Thursday, August the 27th. So that takes us then to a closed session matter. And before moving into closed session, we need a motion to do so. And Councillor Dubanow, I understand that you have the resolution for this?
Yes, I do, Your Worship.
And I guess prior to, Madam Clerk, just clarify for me, is it after the resolution or prior to the resolution that I asked the councillors to confirm that they will be alone during the closed session meeting?
I believe you should do it now, Your Worship, before the resolution.
Okay. And we'll hope that it passes. So before we begin this meeting, I need each member that is attending electronically to confirm that no one else is present with them and that they are not recording this portion of the meeting. So I will start with Councillor Dubanow, since I'm looking at you. Can you confirm that? Can you confirm that you are alone and not recording the meeting?
Yes, Your Worship, I confirm I am alone and I am not recording the meeting.
Councillor Noyes?
Yes, Your Worship, I am alone. I'm not recording the meeting.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, Mayor Redekop, I'm alone and not recording the meeting.
Councillor McDermott?
Yes, Your Worship, I'm alone and not recording the meeting.
Councillor Zanko?
Yes, I am alone and I'm not recording the meeting.
Councillor Butler?
Yes, I confirm I am alone and I am not recording the meeting.
And Madam Clerk, I confirm that I am alone in this cavernous council chamber and I am not recording this meeting. So Councillor Dubanow, would you please proceed with a motion for us to go into closed session?
Yes, Your Worship. Councillor Zanko, would you be willing to second this? Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Zanko, that council does now go into closed session at 6:12 p.m. to discuss the following. Pursuant to Section 239(2)(c) of the Municipal Act 2001, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and subsection 239(2)(f), advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, re Graber Avenue.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to the motion? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. So then we will go into closed session and members of council and senior staff will be leaving this meeting and going into our virtual closed session. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
That's correct, Your
Okay.
Worship.
Thank you. So we're all here. Councillor Zanko, you have a motion for us to rise and reconvene? And,
Yes, I do.
Without report.
I don't see Councillor Lubberts.
No, with report.
Yeah,
With report. It would be with
Mhm.
report, Your
With
Worship.
report.
staff to proceed as directed, right?
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that council does now rise and reconvene from closed sessions at 7:13 p.m. with report that staff proceed as directed.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to the regional councillor report, and Councillor Insinet, you're still with us.
Mayor
evening.
Redekop, I am here. You can't get rid of me that easy. Good evening to you and to all the councillors. As you're aware, the federal and provincial governments are assisting with the costs associated to with regards to the coronavirus, both locally here in Fort Erie and at the region. It was welcome news to hear that the region will be receiving $12.1 million to offset the costs and another $600,000 approximately for transit. In preliminary budget talks, Regional Council had been cautioned that the levy would be dependent on the cost of COVID. So with this input of funds, it is hoped that the increase in the levy will be minor. The region budget workshops and meetings all have been scheduled and they're set to begin shortly. I won't put words in the mayor's mouth, but I am sure we will both be looking to see how we can keep the increase to the levy at a bare minimum. The Chief of Niagara Regional Police Services appeared before council on 2 occasions and advised of the many different programs that they have in place respecting diversity and inclusion. One of the new programs, the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team, MCRRT or MCART, has a police officer teamed up with a trained mental health worker. They respond to mental health matters, and while in its infancy stage, this has already proven to be a valuable tool. Of over 800 interactions with police and with 800 interactions with people in crisis, 717 were de-escalated and no one was taken into custody. The team is now up and running in St. Catharines and Thorold area, and is hoped the program will be expanded coming to our area. The new guidelines for waste collections have been sent out to residents. There are still concerns from residents living in single-family dwellings and those living in multi-unit buildings. I'd ask anyone that still has the concerns to check the region website for the specific information, and I will make myself available for comments or questions. At the AMO conference that was held last week, that Mayor Redekop spoke about, there was a delegation there that spoke to the Minister of Long-Term Care. Having talked with the director and the acting director this morning, the community consultation process for Gilmore Lodge that was supposed to have taken place in March will be taking place tomorrow via teleconference. This stage, as you're aware, is mandatory. So once completed, the plans will be forwarded to the ministry, followed by the drawings. The ministry is aware of the plans and drawings and are already prepared and set for approval. Thus far, the timeline is still set for construction to begin in 2021. I will end it at that, Mayor Redekop, and if anybody has any concerns or questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Encina. Do any members of council have any questions? I see no hands, so you were concise and clear as usual. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, sir.
Thank you very much, Councillor Encina. That takes us then to presentations and delegations, and I know that Mr. Azar Mohammed has been waiting patiently by, and we appreciate your being here. And I see that you're with us now, and you're going to be making a PowerPoint presentation to us.
Yes, thanks very much, Mayor. I'm about to share my screen here and would like a confirmation once everybody can see. Okay, is everyone able to see the opening slides?
No, it hasn't come up on our screen yet, but I'm wondering whether Reed can figure that out.
Okay.
If you click on the green share button, so if you go down to the lower middle,
okay,
you can click on share screen and then select the screen that you would like to have shown.
I'm looking for it here. Oh, on their screen there. Okay. And share screen.
Got it.
Okay.
Everybody's gone again.
Well, Councillor.
I'm back. I'm good.
All right.
Okay, we see that. So, Mr. Mohammed, you're on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Yeah, back to my first screen. Just had a few opening comments here. Get everybody's faces out of the way there. So, good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. Certainly has been a while since I last made an appearance before council. although this is a digital one, it's nice to share some great progress that we've made with each of you this evening. You know, as the screen says, we've actually been pretty busy, and I think, you know, from our perspective, I think there's, for much of the last 14 years, it's really been about pursuing approvals and investment partners on a graduated per milestone basis. We have been extremely careful about not making any premature statements that could create undue public influence, expectation, and activity. Thus, our absence, which has been deliberate, actually feeds a lot of the rumor mills and conspiracy theories that we have abandoned our plans. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. We actually prefer this low profile for the time being, and as we have been able to achieve major milestones in areas like land acquisition, facility design, and project management with global leaders like Ellis Don. Jeff Gordon, who's still very much with us, has spearheaded our track and motorsports strategy as part of our long-term relationship, creating tremendous value in the process. We have also continued to work with our educational partners like Brock University, McMaster, the University of Ontario for Innovation and Technology, and Niagara College, as it relates to creating venues for research and development, testing, and higher learning. Our vision remains fully intact and nothing has changed. Now, obviously, you know, looking at, you know, the project and how it's developed, I mean, you see some really cool renderings over there. I mean, this has been a lot of work into the various components of the development. But, you know, I think that it's really now dealing with some of the challenges that we faced. And I think it's fair to say that CMS has faced every possible challenge a project could experience. I can also say that our resilience has allowed us to overcome these trials with great success. I wanted to share some of the more challenging areas with you this evening, highlighting the very legitimate reasons for the delays that have affected our development timelines thus far, despite the achievement of major milestones. Now, the reality is that very few financing partners are able to participate in a project like ours. This is because of things like the specialized understanding that's involved, the closed loop nature of the motorsports community, the appetite for risk required in light of recent changes to the motorsports industry. For example, things like the ESG movement, ESG meaning ethically, socially conscious and green. And then, of course, the carbon neutrality trends that have been tremendous during the last 10 years, 14 years. And what's more is that this is all exacerbated by current market conditions, especially in Canada. This has forced us to look overseas for foreign investment, which brings its own array of challenges, such as banking and regulatory procedures. Thankfully, we have secured a major investment partner who is willing to navigate these procedures and invest in the project. And this is a huge win. We have literally spent millions of dollars, approximately 35 million to be more precise, in navigating the bureaucratic process and now having a firm understanding of what is required. You know, while it has been a huge distraction and energy of our resources, we now know that the key to navigating successfully is having a predictable and abundant time frame. And this is one of the reasons why you know, we are pursuing an extension to the sunset clause. Without it, you know, our tens of millions of dollars and 14 years of persistent effort would be wasted. While we have begun this process to extend, council support is going to be key to our success. Now, there have been a lot of questions about our properties, their status and disposition. Now, our reluctance to disclose all this information has actually been deliberate and designed to protect us from speculators, land banks, and generally greedy people who, while we conducted negotiations to acquire the core lands that were necessary and integral for the development. So here we tried to illustrate the various components to the land, and the yellow boundary that you see defines the CMS special policy area. Shaded in red are the lands owned by our companies. In pink are the properties that will be acquired and are owned by supportive landowners for which we've maintained a relationship with. And when I say supportive, supportive for the project, supportive to see it happen. In the blue color, these are the OMB mandated purchases that have no development potential that we will be acquiring upon receipt of our major investors' funds. And in the green, which is just a couple of small blocks represented here, these are noise receptors, and they have been identified by our sound mitigation master plan, which we also will be acquiring upon receipt of funds. So as you can see, with respect to any questions related to properties, the majority of core development lands have now been acquired. Now, nothing comes without a plan, and the last 14 years have been an exercise in adapting and responding to various changes in both the motorsports industry and the global financial system. COVID-19 has obviously not helped either. But that said, what should be obvious by now is our absolute ironclad commitment to executing and developing this project. Now, clearly our first priority is to address the extension of the sunset clause. And our written request has actually been submitted per the procedure. This will effectively allow us to remove the remaining holding provisions and move the project forward. The next priority thereafter will be to build upon the essential work concluded over the last 3 years. We have worked extensively with our construction advisors, Elliston, to identify specialized engineering experts in track development, structural design, and operations. We now have a detailed project execution plan, which we will be happy to share with council confidentially, and a schedule covering core areas of development, including our material costs, labor, phasing schedules in specific detail. Presently, we have an estimated 2.5-year plan to cover an initial phase to build the motorsports infrastructure supported by all ancillary structures covering event support, research and development, and the hospitality component. CMS is a game changer on so many levels. 2,500 jobs and $450 million of annual economic impact. And these are the words of the province, not ours, and it speaks for themselves. It will require nothing short of this extraordinary team that we have thankfully been able to build. While many institutions, individuals, and advisors come and go, the true differentiators reflected here have stood the test of time as our real champions. The value that Jeff Gordon has brought in is unparalleled, and his input, excitement, and effort for CMS continues to inspire us. At the same time, our continued focus on R&D initiatives will make a major impact on global environmental and educational infrastructure, including our centers of excellence for students and the advancement of sustainable technologies in motorsports, like electric vehicle development and carbon neutrality. Finally, when you consolidate the vision towards implementation, our construction and development leadership in organizations like Elliston and MRK1 ensures that we are making sound investment decisions while delivering a truly world-class result. Our intention today has been to provide an update to council about our action plan to move CMS beyond procedure and into development. There is simply no precedent or blueprint for what we are looking to achieve. Hence, our request involves council's support in keeping the efforts alive so that we can continue moving this ultra-ambitious project to a culmination. And here's the request. Our group has invested over $35 million in CMS over the course of 14 years. Our commitment is obvious. We ask for council's continued support for our initiatives and its endorsement towards our process as it pertains to the extension of our sunset clause through the LPAT. All we need is a simple letter of support. Now, before concluding, I'd like to emphasize that for the project to have made it this far is nothing short of impossible. It has survived things that I could not have imagined, and to somehow get this far. However, we now face this issue of a technicality, the sunset clause. We understand the purpose of the sunset clause to create realistic timelines that determine whether normal projects will proceed in a normal world. As you know, however, this is not a normal project, and this is anything but a normal world. On a final note, I wanted to especially thank Mayor Redekop, staff, and our council for the opportunity to present and welcome your questions. All support to date has been much appreciated. In fact, we will continue to count on it as we push this world-class project forward. We have never wavered on our commitment to the town and the region. While there is still much to do, we are extremely excited about working closely with the town to clear any remaining requirements to proceed. At this point, however, the request is simple, that we need your ongoing support. I thank you very much for allowing me this time, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. Any questions by members of council? I must say, before we go there, that I don't know who the letter of support would come from or what you've got in mind. This is a zoning issue, and the sunset clause is part of a zoning bylaw. So typically it wouldn't be a letter of support that would come from a mayor. Typically this is something that would be done by way of resolution by members of council. So I presume that that's something that you'd be agreeable to.
Yes, absolutely, Mayor. I mean, not again, the unprecedents of what we're achieving here and requiring. I'm not very familiar with the actual documentation or procedural requirements. If that's the case, then absolutely, that is something that we would absolutely welcome.
Right. So I'm going to ask members of council if you have any questions. And since we're sharing the screen, I don't have you all in front of me at once. So if you would just raise your hand and I'll try to pick you guys up. There we go. Any members of council? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. To Mr. Mohammed. Thank you for the update. It's timely. It's happening in my ward, and I would say, yes, I have lots of questions, and there's lots of rumors about what will be, what could be, what won't be. So I'm glad for the clarification that you are planning on moving forward. We see this as a huge opportunity for job creation and economic spin-offs, and the town can definitely benefit from that. My questions regards to the properties that you currently own. I actually had a few residents ask me, there's a few homes on the property. If the information that's been provided to me is correct, they're not occupied, that they're basically vacant. And some of the nearby neighbors, and granted there's not any neighbor too close by, but they're concerned that the houses are just basically left abandoned to deteriorate. And I guess there's a water going into one of the basements and things like that. And they're worried about some people doing, getting into some problems, some nonsense going on there, and then it's spilling out, to the surrounding areas. Do you have any plans for demolishing the current buildings that are there now?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the things that we obviously are timing on areas like the financial release of funds from the investors had allowed us to first of all close on those properties. And at the request of some of those property owners who needed additional time to find a new place, in some cases, we had given them up to 24 months to stay in the properties and before moving on. Once they were able to move out, there were additional times that were required to remove certain components, fixtures, and fittings from each of those properties. And we did our best to maintain the safety of those properties. Unfortunately, as you rightly pointed out, some of those properties were subject to vandalism. One of our properties was actually burned to the ground, and then we had to mobilize to make sure some of the other properties were secured. We're working on a demolition plan with Fort Erie Fire Department, and we're identifying the priorities to ensure that there's public safety is secured, but obviously, safety of the firefighters, that if something were to happen, that they would be at least in a safe position. But unfortunately, I mean, the reality is that COVID has generated a lot of issues on some of the houses and structures that we have, and it's just come to the point where demolition is the only answer. And we do have a plan to deal with that as quickly as possible.
Thank you. That's all.
Any other councillors? Councillor McDermott.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your delegation today, Azar. It's been a long time since I've seen you.
Thanks very much, Councillor McDermott. Good to see you again.
So I think that, before I ask my questions, just want to preface with the fact that I've always supported the project. I think you know that. I've been to many dinners, lobbied many cabinet ministers, and have been to all the pretty much all the trade shows that you've been at. So I am very supportive. I just want to take the opportunity while I have you here today is to try and get some questions answered that people would, our residents would be asking me.
Yep.
And so this process just to get here has taken 14 years. And now you're asking for a year extension on this sunset clause. What is going to change between now, if you're granted that year extension? Is that going to give you an opportunity to get the funds necessary to move on with the project and get the properties that you need to get closed?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I think, first of all, as far as the properties that we need to build are concerned, I think in the map you've seen that all of the properties necessary for the development have been acquired. And those 3 properties that we had embarcated in marketed in pink color, I'll share the copies of those maps with you. Those are with landowners that are absolutely supportive of our initiatives going forward. And they've been extremely patient with us. And, we've kept in touch to update them in terms of, that acquisition. And as far as the funds are concerned, well, I've also explained today that, we do have our international investor and our funds secured to develop this project. We have presented that kind of information confidentially to the mayor and the CAO. It is obviously something that we cannot disclose in a public forum, but all of that information will always remain confidential. So the 2 key things is that initially the problems that we faced were money had a difficulty in coming in. And second was that we didn't have the money to purchase those necessary properties. And we've effectively managed those 2 areas. So now it's really coming down to a technicality. And so what's going to change is obviously the ability for us to use this additional year to ramp up the activities on the site again. Now, without any kind of risk, with the sunset clause being managed, we would then be able to, spend all of the investment and engage all of the teams that are essentially ready to go to do things like remove the remaining holding provisions, submitting our sunset, submitting our site plan, getting the detailed designs done, and really pushing the button here to move forward. It doesn't hurt anybody more than us to have our money tied up and $35 million just to sit and do nothing. So it's in our best interest that we managed and used the time. Obviously, it burned up a lot of runway with the 10 years that was given, but a lot of these problems were the result of years and years of mitigation. and sort of an unknown road. You can't tell when the regulatory agencies that are involved in international fund clearance will complete their tasks, right? You can't predict, obviously, I mean, COVID, and I'm not here to say COVID is the reason, but when you look at things like COVID, obviously the inability of your crews, you know, to you know, get onto the site and complete a lot of that preliminary work is there. And you know, the point about all of this is that it's uncharted territories. There's no precedent for doing all of this stuff. And so we learned, it was very expensive for us to learn, but at the same time now we're at that stage where we can move.
Okay, thank you. My screen went black, so I don't know if you can still hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, very good. Another question I have is, since the end of June, I guess, construction work has been allowed under COVID-19 rules. Has your engineering and construction crews been able to get any pre-construction work done, or have they not yet been able to get out in the field?
Well, I think the next phase, obviously, and again, it all relates to our ability to have the funds arrive from our investors. With Ellis Dawn, there has been significant work going onto the site, doing things like drone mapping that allows us to then start looking at, you know, the site servicing work that needs to be done. We're still away from physical movement of dirt and site alteration on the site. I think the only thing that we really did was, you know, to support the construction of the high school, we did offer some of our clean soil so that that project was able to move forward. But as far as the next phase is concerned, we need to now get our teams to assess the site servicing plans that, by the way, have already been submitted as part of our approvals. But we have to now bring that into reality. So the first thing that Ellis Dawn and the crews will do is head to the site and start making, you know, various activities active. And so that's really going to be the next phase where people can actually see something out on the site again.
And just one more question about financing, if you don't mind. I know quite a bit about how difficult it is to get money out of certain countries. Are you relying on investors now that have an easier time of bringing money into the country?
I think that, you know, our investor has great experience in this. And I think that, you know, with respect to some of the changes that have happened in terms of the financial system, which you're probably well aware of, when you deal with things like KYC and anti-money laundering, extra due diligence, source of funds, all of these things are part and parcel of our experience in bringing in foreign direct investment. And I can actually share with you the fact that we did at one point during this 10-year journey lose our funding from an investor because it was just never ending. And unfortunately, you know, that has made, you know, planning excessively difficult. Banks can always give you timelines, but, you know, sometimes it's not always the case where they can stick to their, you know, their actual, you know, commitments. As far as our investor is concerned, you know, we've dealt with over the good part of the last year in mitigating a lot of these issues. And so we don't expect or anticipate that for that to be create any further delays for us.
Okay, thank you. I want to wish you all the luck at LPAT, and I know that the community still supports this project, and it's my hope that you make it. So it's also my hope that over the next year you keep in touch with us. Let us know how you're making out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think one of the fundamental reasons why we've maintained a presence in Fort Erie, lands aside, but our office on 168 Garrison Road is for the purposes of facilitating councillors, members of the public to come and see what's going on, and that will always continue. I thank you for the continued support, Councillor, and look forward to delivering for you.
Thank you.
Any other councillors? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. And thank you very much for your presentation and your update. You said that now with your new investors that you don't foresee any problems with transferring the money into Canada. Can you give us a timeline on when you expect to see the money start coming in?
Well, I think, that's, as far as the process is concerned, we're supposed to have funds already here. And things like tax structuring, the way that the companies have to be set up, all of that is done. So it's literally the ability for us to look at the sunset clause and see where that takes us in order for us to really push the buttons and start dropping the larger funds for what we need to do over the next year. So Councillor, that's really, where it's all boiling down to, is that as far as funds are concerned, we're very confident. We have shown our ability to the mayor and Tom about where those funds are. This is not Middle East money, which was also a challenge for us during the early stages or mid stages of the project. So we're confident that our money will be ready for us to execute within the next few weeks.
So you expect the money to be transferred within the next couple of weeks? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I think that is a reasonable and safe statement to make here.
Now, that will happen all in phases, I'm assuming?
Yes, as we continue to take a measured approach on the development, the first phase is literally soft costs. So we're on the design stage. We continue to build the sequencing of what we want to build. We know that our zoning bylaw asks us to start with the motorsports infrastructure. And as I mentioned in the presentation, that's our first phase over the next 2.5 years, is to get track and operations up, and then start with some of the supporting elements. So it may not be the entire development. There's so many aspects which talk about hotel and hospitality, the research and development component, the educational component, but everything starts with the track and then moving that forward. And then looking at the environment for investment over the next year. In 2.5 years, we don't know where COVID will be and whether we're still in a position to have open events for the public. So based on that, our investment will be staggered as we proceed.
And I mean, this has been going on for years. When this first came in to Fort Erie, when we discussed it, it was a $450 million project. Is it still a $450 million project?
Oh, it's much more than that, given the fact that we've added in a couple of enhancements, which is, a more versatile track that will accommodate various forms of racing that still fall within the zoning bylaw and the approvals, but also looking at some other components related to potential activities on our industrial area. And we've talked to a lot of manufacturers. I think there's components related to a free trade zone in Niagara that could bring some level of manufacturing to the site, because those manufacturers are related to the automotive industry, and the track is an essential infrastructure for them to test a lot of the development that they could potentially have. So building out an environment for industrial use that will share in the tracks operation has been added. The work with the universities, the square footage that they would need for these kinds of activities on the site, that's also become something that has been added or enhanced. And then the other thing about why our costs are also going to be increased is the acute healthcare facility. we can't operate the track unless there's some infrastructure on the site that can take care of, acute healthcare needs. But when there aren't events, as discussed with, with council, with the CAO, that, our health facility would be open to the public. And it would cover things like having some additional beds. It won't be a hospital, but certainly things like MRIs, physiotherapy, some different levels of medical services that will continue. So that is, an additional, in upwards of $30 to $50 million that we are looking to additionally invest in. So is there a final number? We right now we're looking at about 700 million as opposed to the 450 million. We'll look and see, what other partnerships form as a result of our moving forward, and that number could actually increase.
All right, thank you. You said that you're confident that the money will start being transferred to Canada within the next couple of weeks. And so what kind of timeline are we looking at for equipment, digging and building permits, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think, Councillor, the immediate requirement for the funds will be obviously to deal with the remainder of those properties that we need to acquire. That's the first thing we're going to take down. The time required between seeing equipment back on the site involves a good part of a year's work on the papers with Ellis Dawn, with other specialists, MRK1, on the track design component, on the structural design. There's elements of the development that are difficult and unprecedented. So as a result of that, it's really drawing board stuff. Maybe perhaps the earliest that we could actually see, potentially, equipment out onto the site would probably be at the next construction season, possibly next year, if we really are able to get through our sunset clause and then, go full throttle on this.
So possibly next year, but you don't know.
I can't confirm that because, the first thing is that let's deal with the sunset clause. And then the second thing is that let's try to get as much possible on the removal of the holding provisions, which involves us submitting a final detailed site plan. And the work involved in the final detailed site plan is extensive. And we won't be able to get permits to do things like site alteration until and unless we have that process sorted out with town staff. But I'm hopeful. We've been, getting a lot of support from the town, and I think that the way that they have always given us priority to support what we need to do, we'll just work together with them and try to cut as much time as possible.
So you've been dealing with this project for like 14 years now. You've managed to shore up $35 million, but yet you don't have any design work done?
We have design work done. I think that design work is obviously subject to a lot of changes as we progressed. But if I'm going to drop, $100 million in design work, I want to know that my sunset clause is in place and I have the ability to move the project forward.
Okay, all right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other councillors have any other questions? Councillor Butler, do you have your hand up? No. No, okay. So Mr. Mohammed, I've got a few questions, and I must say that Mr. Coogan and I did receive something from your investor, and we had expected to receive something in addition on Thursday or Friday. We haven't received that, but I'm just wondering, the sunset clause requires you to do certain things before the holding provisions can be released. Is that correct?
Yes, this is our understanding. So it's the September 13th date which has been given to, and it's the effective date of the zoning bylaw. And without that zoning bylaw, then our understanding is that the entire initiative becomes null and void, and it will require a new process. And so to extend that process, we have to go through the LPAT. It was my understanding initially that this may be a process that the town would deal with through some sort of special vote or something of that order. But if it is in fact LPAT from based on the communication that we did share with the town, then that is the process that now we will pursue.
Right. I think it's clear that because the OMB, the name of the body in those days, granted or dealt with an appeal of the zoning bylaw, it's LPAT that has to approve the extension of the sunset clause. And as an example, do you have a belief that within 1 year, if there was an extension granted, you can meet the requirements of lifting the holding provisions?
Absolutely. I think, Mayor, what a lot of the public doesn't know, and the council as well, that the amount of background work that has been done under the radar here has been significant. And that relates to things like planning on the basis of the studies that were submitted, respecting the use of the land, and the environmental issues that were addressed during our process of approvals. And so from the area of design, a lot of work has been done. We've identified, areas which we can actually shorten in time in terms of getting a site plan submitted. As far as the land is concerned, that is something that, the funds arrive and the closing is done immediately. And then that's always been, our agenda, and we hope to execute that. As far as the holding provisions are concerned, many of the major holding provisions have actually been submitted and removed. Now, those that remain are areas like, the master traffic management plan, for which the town also knows that extensive work was done, and it was a function of a final completion. There may be some small updates here and there, but that's something that our engineering firms will endeavor to do, and it's not going to take a lot of time. So the 1 year from our perspective is a safe time to deliver what we need to deliver. And like I said before, we would rather have everything sorted out within the next several months if it was up to us, because it's our money, it's our investment that has been held up, for which we really don't have any benefit to gain. So we want to see this investment moving forward, and we're not looking to tie up or waste any further time. We've dealt with the major issues that I had explained today. Fundamentally, a lot of it relates to international funding clearances, but we have spent that time significantly during the last several years to mitigate a lot of this stuff.
So you've indicated that the money from the investor isn't here yet. It's not in Canada yet. Is that my understanding?
Yes, there was some infrastructure, some approvals, some investigations that had to be cleared. And from our investor, we understand that that is all now taken care of. So from that perspective, we've created a immediate schedule and use of proceeds for them. And based on that, a lot of these activities, like working on the holding provisions and submission of the sunset or submission of the site plan, is our priority.
So have you been given any information from LPAT, the local planning appeal tribunal, how long it might take for them to process your request to extend the sunset clause?
We haven't received any information so far. So we've followed procedure with respect to our written request, and are waiting for the response from LPAT. And we'll look to working with the town as well as the province on seeing what exactly is the timeline and how we can accelerate that.
Right. So until, I think you intimated that until you have confirmation that the sunset clause will be extended, there won't be further monies invested in the project. Is that? Is that
No,
what you s-
that's not actually the case. I mean, we have to then measure the kind of investment that we will be, confirming in terms of the phasing of the project. The sunset clause, I think I'm reasonably confident that we can deal with the sunset clause. And therefore we've already gone ahead and made our plans in lieu of an extension. So obviously it's coming right down to the wire as a race does. But I do believe that our focus right now is to get that information from LPAT as quickly as possible. And in parallel, I mean, working on our plans for the investment to go forward.
Well, I appreciate that. And are you suggesting that the money is available to acquire the balance of the properties that are required for the project, regardless of what happens with the sunset clause?
Yes, I think that's something that we've always committed to, and we've been planning for that money to arrive so that we can take care of these initial requirements.
So then,
As far as moving forward then is concerned, with the properties all under one control, then that's where we really have to look at how this investment will be and what the future of the Speedway will hold in terms of what we can actually do. And if there's another process that we have to go through, then we need to understand that process. But we're here to at least make something of all of the efforts that we've put in over the last many years. And we need to figure that out, Mayor. That's a question that I can't give you all of the answers to right now. And I'm sure the public is always wondering about the same thing. But now it's really all about our ability to get the sunset clause issue removed so that we can think clearly and we can come to invest the way we committed in 2010.
yeah, I think we understand that. I'm just trying to get some clarification then. So the money is available. You
Yes.
can acquire the balance of the lands, and that's something that can move forward at the same time as you're seeking the extension of the sunset clause.
Yes, this is all a function of where we have landed with respect to losing a lot of time on the 10-year runway that we did have and trying to make this thing happen at the end of the day with the time that we have left.
And so those are things that can take place right now, relatively soon.
Yes.
And my understanding is that once you own all of the lands necessary for the project, you could then submit a site plan for approval by the municipality. What's the status of the site plan at this stage?
So as you know, we had submitted a very preliminary stage site plan during our application process. Obviously, there's been, again, additions to that site plan that we have to reflect. As far as the motorsports component is concerned, there's also been some additions, again, respecting the allowable uses of the zoning bylaw that we've added in. We initially had a plan for just an oval track and a road course. There's been other elements that we've looked at. I think the ongoing discussions with some of the universities and the kind of work that they would be conducting require some level of additional infrastructure on the site. So these are the things that we've identified. Our engineers have reflected on what we need as far as that is concerned. So this is not a full 1 year process to submit a site plan. There's extensive work that we will piggyback on and submit in consultation with the town, obviously.
So while that's all going on, you can then address the other issues relative to eliminating the holding provision.
Yes.
I presume. So there's some studies, et cetera, some of which have already been done, filed, approved, some of which, as you mentioned, the traffic management plan with the MTO, that still needs to be finalized. But
Yes.
that can all take place within a relatively short period of time, I presume, once you have all the lands.
Exactly. A few months from our estimation on the master traffic management plan. All of the other plans, again, we're working with our planning people. IBI is also part of the discussions through Ellis Dawn. And there's been a lot of activity related to how to address the remaining issues in short order.
So let me ask you this. Do you need a year? Do you need an extension of the sunset clause for a year in order to meet these provisions relative to the holding?
I think that, the year is a safe date for me, and knowing the fact that, we've been going through almost a 10-year process and experience a lot of unpredictability. I think with the work that we have completed already, 1 year is a sufficient time for us to deal with the back and forths involved in getting the remaining holding provisions cleared. So I think, say less than a year. I would endeavor to try to wrap everything up in the shortest time possible, but I can't predict, things going forward. If there were, for example, like we're talking about LPAT, we don't know what that time frame is right now unless we hear it from LPAT, and what is the mobilization required for all of those things. So in the perfect world, 1 year will be more than enough for us to make all of the requirements to town in order to then be able to at least get the permits required to mobilize on the lands again and start this construction phase that we've been waiting for.
Right. And my understanding is that LPAT has requested that those parties that appealed the bylaw are to be given notice of your request for an extension of the sunset clause?
This is what we gleaned out of the response from LPAT that Fort Erie Planning Department had also shared with us, which we greatly appreciate, because we didn't really know we didn't even know what actually happened to OMB, and now it's LPAT, and so not understanding that process. That is what we understand, that LPAT will now look at this. They will investigate if we do need to reach out to any of the appellants, if we and if there's any other requirements from their perspective. So waiting to hear for that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mohammed. So when we get to new business this evening, if a councillor wishes to move that we support your request for an extension of the sunset clause on behalf of Canadian Motor Speedway, that will be brought forward and then will be dealt with by council. Are there any other councillors that had any questions of Mr. Mohammed before I let him go? Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hi, Azar. It is nice to see you. My question is basically pertaining to, I know you've made mention of, flying under the radar, and I understand a lot of things that are happening are confidential. My question is, could we maybe have an agreement that we do communicate a little bit more? Because all of us are approached by residents, and there's been a long period of time where we actually don't know what to say. And, every time you come to council, it's exciting. Your presentation is exciting. I'm sure the general public are going to have so much excitement. But then as time goes by, then rumors start again. So my question only is, can we maybe keep in communications a little bit better?
Absolutely. I think that, I'm not sure sort of the procedure with respect to councillors meeting together with us. If there's a way to, if it's only done through the Monday meetings, it does become a little bit restrictive, but I mean, we can certainly make ourselves available anytime during the week for any councillors to meet individually, collectively. We can figure out maybe a bi-weekly update for everyone. And you're welcome to come to our office where we can present where the activities are and what sort of the next phase. It's also an opportunity to meet a lot of our other team members who do come and work out of our Fort Erie office, from the engineers to the designers to the specialists. If that works, then whatever is a frequency that is works for all of the councillors. We would welcome, a regular meeting or an update session with everybody. And as far as the public is concerned, we do have members of public that show up, and our lovely Claire in Fort Erie does an excellent job in updating wherever she can. The only things that we will never update, the public on are obviously anything related to our investors, and that's just because we are a private enterprise, and that is something that we will always hold close to ourselves. But as far as activity on the site is concerned, as far as sharing our plans, we would love to do that, and we can work out something with council, whatever is the best scenario to suit everybody.
Nothing further, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanko. Any other councillors? If not, then thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed, and we look forward to dealing with this later on and hearing more from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
That takes us into the next delegation, Mr. Art King.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. King.
Okay. I don't see any. Okay, start my video. Okay. There we go.
There you go. And we can see you.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's always a good thing.
I was very
Good
interested in that previous presentation. I'm a great racing fan. Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to council this evening on behalf of the Fort Erie SPCA. As members of council, you received a letter from Leo Slalom of Grill Barristers in Toronto earlier this month. I believe the letter was dated July the 28th. Late last week, with the approval of the Fort Erie SPCA Board of Directors, I sent members of council, some Town of Fort Erie staff members, and our lawyer, Gary Enscat, my response to that letter on behalf of the SPCA. I've also viewed portions of the video recording of the meetings of council held on July the 20th, 2020, and August the 10th, 2020, wherein there were questions and comments relative to the Fort Erie SPCA. Also had an opportunity since Friday to review the agenda for tonight's meeting and wish to speak to the three motions proposed by Councillor Butler. In respect to Councillor Butler's first motion, I do not believe that an animal rights bylaw is needed in Fort Erie. I also question whether Councillor Butler fully understands the difference between animal rights and animal welfare. An animal rights bylaw would have far-reaching implications for all animal owners in the town of Fort Erie. It would impact all livestock and poultry farmers, venues such as Safari Niagara and Stevensville, the Fort Erie racetrack, and other equestrian facilities would also be affected. In my opinion, animals in the town of Fort Erie are afforded sufficient animal welfare protection under existing provincial and federal statutes. In addition, there are countless animal welfare guidelines covering animal stewardship. There is no question that animal welfare can be improved in the town of Fort Erie. However, this does not require an additional bylaw. It does require more awareness and education around the implementation of existing guidelines to assure compliance with and enforcement of existing statutes. In respect to Councillor Butler's second motion, I see no need for any amendments to the bylaw 11997 to improve either animal control or animal welfare in the town of Fort Erie. Council and staff, previously council and town staff, rejected the regulation of additional animals, specifically cats, under the bylaw. Other animals, including wildlife, are protected under other existing provincial legislation and animal welfare guidelines, as I stated earlier. In respect to Councillor Butler's third motion, I fully agree that the roles and responsibilities of all parties under the Animal Control Services Agreement, which we call the Animal Control Contract, need to be clarified. This need has already been discussed with town staff, our shelter manager, and with our lawyer. I'm somewhat dismayed by the wording and some of the tone of the whereas clauses related to the third motion. In respect to premises audits, health and safety audits, etc., these audits are already done through the Pounds Act, the Ministry of Labor, etc., by the province. To state that the Fort Erie SPCA has not provided information is absolutely false. The Fort Erie SPCA provide detailed reports to the town on a monthly basis. We have never refused to answer any request for additional information. As for complaints and allegations, the fact that I accepted the invitation to attend tonight's meeting as a delegation on behalf of the Fort Erie SPCA is evidence that the town can investigate complaints and allegations. Also note that the town has full access to the conduct of the Fort Erie SPCA since one of the councillors is appointed as a Fort Erie SPCA board member. The shelter manager advised me that Mr. Cuckett could not recall any complaint, I repeat, any complaint within the past 7 years that he's been in position regarding our compliance with or our implementation of the services agreement. Prior to the renewal of each services agreement, we provide town staff with detailed financial information to assure them that our revenues and our expenses relative to delivery of the services agreement are reasonable. To suggest that sole sourcing of that services agreement is unacceptable is an insult to the diligence and oversight of town staff who make that recommendation to council based on their review of the Fort Erie SPCA and other possible service providers. In closing, we look forward to an ongoing mutually beneficial relationship with the town of Fort Erie. And as stated in the letter that I delivered to councillors, I invite any member of the public, including members of council, to visit the shelter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. King. Are there any members of council that have any questions? Councillor Butler, and then Zanko, and then Lubberts. Councillor Butler, you'll have to unmute.
Sorry. Oh, so sorry. I had the other button.
Now you're with us.
So thank you, Mr. King, for your presentation this evening. I want to thank you for coming here tonight. I didn't realize it was by invitation. I thought that you willingly came on your own without an invitation, but that's good to know that that's clarified. I have a few questions for you. And my first question is, do you believe that your team is experienced, knowledgeable, and have been trained properly with respect to animal care from receipt of an animal to end of life stage?
Absolutely.
Great. Would it surprise you to learn that there are documented statements from over 25 people, both former employee and volunteers, that state that they had never been trained or given legislatively required health and safety training, nor any onboarding?
I'm aware of those allegations and I'm not going to make any comments. That's in the hands of our lawyer.
Okay. You mentioned in your letter that there
nobody's brought any of that forward to me or anybody on our board.
You mentioned in your letter that there have been allegations against the SPCA manager, the staff, and the board of directors. Is that correct?
That was in the letter from Leo Solomon.
That was in your letter to us.
Yes, and that was in response to the letter from Leo Solomon. I have not seen any of those allegations other than from one person who sent us a letter and has been making allegations on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, so you mentioned that there was an investigation that was conducted by Animal Welfare Services, correct, in your submission to us?
Yes.
And I looked at the report and it does not seem that it was related to the two dogs specifically, but rather it was more of a site visit to look at the shelter. Is that correct?
That was in response by a complaint.
Right. It was a response to a complaint, although in your letter you seem to have tied it to the two dogs that were mentioned. And those two dogs were, if you forgive me, I think they were called Storm and Oreo. Is that correct? I personally don't know who made the complaint. There's only been one complaint. I understand that, but it wasn't tied into those two dogs specifically. It was a complaint-driven examination. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe it was
Yes.
tied to those dogs, but I'm not sure of that.
And so that report examined the drug log and that the SPCA keeps with respect to euthanizing animals. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yes.
That,
Did you know that the CAO had asked for a copy of that report and that a redacted copy was sent to him by Ms. Tremblay?
what do you mean a redacted copy?
Well, in fact, the portion that she shared with the CAO didn't include the portion that you had submitted to us. It was just namely a 1 paragraph, 2 paragraph acknowledging. It was actually the first 2 paragraphs of the report saying that, you know, they didn't see anything specific that needed to be addressed. But when you submitted the fulsome report, it was quite shocking to me. So, namely that sedation of wildlife so that they do not feel pain while dying was not happening. Do you agree that that statement was in that report?
That's misleading.
No, it's not misleading. I quoted it directly, sir. And also, it's correct that the report that Animal Welfare Services distinctly says that the use of T61 or barbiturates by intracardiac injection on fully conscious animals are prohibited by both the Canadian Council on Animal Care and the American Veterinary Medical Association guidelines to euthanasia. Things that were being done at the SPCA.
Have you read those guidelines?
Have you, is that not what it says in the report?
Have you read the guidelines?
Is it not what it says in the report, sir? I'm
Okay,
asking you a
so
direct question.
just hold on.
I'm
both of
asking
you.
a question, your worship.
Councillor Butler, you're supposed to be directing your questions through the chair, and Mr.
Yes,
King is supposed to be
Your worship.
directing his responses, and you're not supposed to be arguing with each other.
I'm
You've
not
asked a
arguing.
question.
I'm just asking a question and I'd like a response.
You've asked the question, repeat the question so that Mr. King can respond.
Isn't it correct that the report by Animal Welfare Services distinctly says that the use of T61 or barbiturates by intracardiac injection on fully conscious animals are prohibited by both the Canadian Council on Animal Care and the American Veterinary Medical Association guidelines to euthanasia was written in that report that you submitted?
That's what the report said, yes.
Yes. So my question then becomes very simple. Earlier, you said that you believe your team to be experienced and knowledgeable, yet how could they not know that the method and drugs they were using to euthanize wildlife was unacceptable?
If you read the guidelines, that's not what it says.
Your worship, in
Well-
the report, I asked the question directly in the report that was submitted by Mr. King, and in there, that was very simply stated by the supervisor that conducted the investigation.
I understand that you've asked the question. Mr. King takes some issue with whether the guidelines apply or not.
Mhm.
That may not,
Through you, your worship, the American Veterinary Medical Association, the reason that they don't recommend the use of T61 is because T61 as a chemical is not available in the United States. It is available in Canada. And if you read the guidelines, and if there was a change, the change was recent. We're haven't been able to find out exactly when the change was made, but the previous 4 inspections over the last 8 years by the province did not identify that we were doing anything wrong. And if you read the guidelines, it is a suggestion. It is not. It's not an out-and-out ban.
Well, you know, your worship, through you to Mr. King, I have a question. I would rather not see an animal suffer. And I understand that that drug alone causes great pain to the animal, and that sedation is recommended prior to administering that drug. And my concern is, and stated in the report, which confirms it, that the individuals that were administering or are administering euthanasia have not been trained properly by a veterinarian or any other person. And so those are allegations that are quite serious. I take them quite serious, and they've been brought to our attention. And you can condemn me all you want, but at the end of the day, Mr. King, we have a responsibility to the general public. And we have a responsibility to the animals that are in our care and control. And we've given that care and control to the SPCA. And we have the right to ask the questions that are hard pressed and that may make people feel uncomfortable. At the end of the day, you know, you have a
Councillor
responsibility.
Butler, excuse me, but you are.
I have
you're
other
right.
questions.
This
Your
is,
Worship.
then you're allowed to ask
I
questions.
understand. I will continue to ask those questions. You mentioned that there were allegations in your submission to us, and did you receive those allegations yourself? As a
No,
board?
whoever is
You
making
never
those
received any
allegations did not.
Let Councillor Butler finish your question, Mr. King, please.
No, I'm just curious. You mentioned that you have received allegations. Is that not the case?
The letter from the lawyer makes allegations. He says they're unfounded, and we have no idea who made them.
Okay, and prior to that, have you ever received allegations from any one individual?
There was one letter back in March or April, I believe.
And has anyone ever made any contact to the SPCA to have their concerns addressed?
No,
Never. Not even to a board of director?
nope, not that I know of.
Okay, I find that very interesting. Did you know, Mr. King, do you know that, let me ask you this. If a complaint was lodged directly to you or a board of director, would you conduct an internal investigation with respect to these allegations?
Yeah, we already have.
Oh, okay. Did you hire a third party or did you conduct it yourself?
We asked our shelter manager for her side of the story.
Did you conduct an investigation? When I say an investigation, I don't mean just a one-sided investigation. I mean a fulsome investigation, contacting the complainant, asking the respondent, and then documenting responses and coming up with a conclusion to assure that there are solutions that are going to be derived and put in place.
At this point in time, it's in the hands of our lawyer to try and find out who's specifically making these allegations and what they are.
Your Worship, I understand. I have a couple of questions. Mr. King, are you aware, or are your board of directors aware, that when an allegation comes to you with respect to animal welfare or even human rights for an individual that has worked in your facility, whether it's a volunteer or a member of employment within the SPCA, that you have a duty to investigate by law?
I have received no allegations, specific allegations to investigate. I have no names. And at this point, our lawyer is trying to find out from Mr. Slalom who's behind all of this.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you said that the SPCA has been submitting documents to us in a proper format. So let me ask you this. Do you believe that financial transparency is a charity's ethical obligation so that its donors understand what their money is being used for?
Absolutely.
Do you? I ask you then, why is it not posted on your website? And why, when we receive documents, is it not deciphered further so that we understand where the money is being spent? I understand that bringing in a veterinarian to take a look at an animal that's sick or that may need to be euthanized is very cost effective. And that euthanasia itself by a veterinarian, that's my dog, by the way, he just is expressing his—
I wonder if you could stick to one question at a time,
Yeah.
Councillor Butler. I think you've asked a question about the obligation to donors, and then I think there was another question before you.
The question was, why isn't it on your website? And why aren't we receiving a deciphered financial?
The town of Fort Erie received our financial statements. What else can I say? And they're audited by Crawford Smith and Swallow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a copy in front of me, but I know we spend thousands of dollars on veterinary services in a year. I don't have the exact figure.
Mm-hmm. So this is why I'm bringing the motions forward, Mr. King, is because there isn't straight bylaws that deal with specific things. And when you ask if I know the difference between animal rights and how it would affect farms and zoos or Safari Niagara, I certainly do. I certainly do know what the implications are. And I don't make them lightly. I think that we
Councillor
have
Butler,
right.
question.
Yeah, I am.
This is for
I'm
questions.
getting to the question, Your Worship. I believe, and I would like to know if you believe, that animals deserve dignity and respect, and whether or not there's a moral conscience there, and further to that, if they experience pain and joy.
Absolutely. That's animal welfare. Animal rights.
Well,
Animal rights is taking animals out of the hands of
I'm
humans.
finished with the line of questioning for now, Your Worship. I would like to listen to other members of council at this point in time.
Fine, Councillor Zanko, you had your hand up next, and then I'm going to Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. King. Mr. King, how long have you been the chair of the SPCA board for?
I'm not sure, several years, 15 or 20.
Okay. Through you, Your Worship, I'm not sure how you haven't seen any complaints. This is my second term on council. I remember receiving many complaints, and as a matter of fact, many individuals came out to provide delegations to council back in 2014. We looked at similar issues. And then, I can tell you, in addition to Councillor Butler, I have also received multiple complaints. Council has received multiple complaints. I'm just wondering, how are complaints handled? If the chair of the board has never received any complaints, where would those complaints be going to when we are receiving them?
I don't know.
So would the board
Has Don
not?
Lubberts
I'm sorry.
received any? Don Lubberts is on council and he is on our board and he has never brought any complaints forward to our board.
Through you, Your Worship, I'm just wondering if maybe a policy needs to be developed for handling of complaints. If the board itself isn't receiving complaints, I know individual members of council do, because I can tell you that I've received many complaints. Perhaps maybe the board just isn't receiving these complaints. Maybe these complaints are being forwarded to actual staff that might not feel comfortable. Has that ever, have given the recent events, have you looked at possibly looking at implementing some steps to ensure that the board is being, made aware of these type of issues?
Mr. King, the question is, I think, does the board have a policy with respect to complaints? And if not, has it considered adopting a policy?
If somebody brought forward something that was credible, we would look into it. But I have no names other than one. And the facts around that are totally opposite. I'm not going to get into that because it's in the hands of our lawyer.
I don't want to cut off Councillor Zanko, but I'd like to get at least that question answered. Does the board have a policy with respect to how to handle complaints?
If somebody came in and said that John Smith had a complaint, whether that was an animal owner or a former employee, then we would look into it. But I've never heard from anybody other than one person.
Back to you, Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering if maybe the board would consider implementing a policy. I feel as though, I'm a credible person, and since I can assure you I've received complaints, I feel as though maybe these complaints aren't getting to the board. So I'm wondering if perhaps that might be something that you can take back to the board and look at developing some complaint policies so everybody's informed.
Yep, fair enough.
My second question, through you, Mr. Worship. You had mentioned that detailed reports come to council monthly. We receive your meeting minutes. I have, in 6 years, never found or seen any detailed reports per se, other than the meeting minutes. Is there additional reports that perhaps I'm just not seeing?
I think I don't see what goes to council. It's my understanding, or sorry, it goes to the town. It's my understanding that there's 3 different reports go in. The bingo reports, which we haven't done in the last few months because of COVID, and then the financial information for the treasurer, and the services agreement detail, which is the intake and handling of animals that come through the shelter. That all goes to the town staff, as far as I know. That's what I've been told.
Okay, Your Worship, if I could, some of the details that I would think would be received in detailed reports, especially after reading the report that you had sent that mentions euthanasia quite a bit throughout this review. I'm wondering if could get. I realize that the SPCA probably wouldn't want to disclose that in a public manner because it is very sensitive, but I'm wondering if perhaps we could be getting a bit more details in that regard monthly.
Because as far as I know, our reports, monthly reports indicate the number of animals that are euthanized. It's relatively low, other than for wildlife that's injured or sick.
Your Worship, if I can just further elaborate on that. Just to be specific, I've never seen any mention of euthanizing animals quite recently, and I know that the complaints pertaining to the 2 dogs that were recently euthanized, they weren't shown on that report. So I was just assuming that we didn't receive that information, but perhaps it could be pointed out if we do receive that. I know that I did ask Mr. Cookett, and he wasn't sure if we received that either.
I'll look into that.
And I see Mr. Cookett had his hand up, Your Worship, but I can finish my questions and you can go to him after if you like.
That's exactly what I'd like to do.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Your Worship, just wondering, and again, I was reading the material that you had sent over the weekend, Mr. King, and it was very informative, and I do appreciate the material. It did bring a number of concerns after reading it to my attention. The one great concern was, why don't we have, or why doesn't the SPCA have a vet tech on staff?
We've never seen the need to have one.
Okay, just further to that, Your Worship, the review that you had sent us, it really does speak to the importance of having a veterinarian, or it does say formal training as well, but it does say formal training with your veterinarian. It also suggests, the last paragraph of this, it also suggests that if you needed assistance, that there is veterinarians available in the province. So that kind of led me to believe that maybe the SPCA isn't getting that type of support now. Is that wrong?
I don't have the figure in front of me, but we spent thousands of dollars every year on veterinary services.
Okay. If I may, Your Worship.
Yes.
I guess my final question, and again, it's with regard to processes. Since you received the review from June 3rd, and there is recommendations, and I'm reading it just as they were presented to me, and I know the one recommendation pertaining to the euthanization of wildlife, it says right in the review that the current process is not acceptable and this policy needs to be changed as soon as possible. Has that policy been changed?
Yes.
Good, thank you. And I think I'll give the floor to other council members at this point, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanko. Councillor Lubberts, you're next.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. And Mr. King, or Dr. King, thank you very much for coming forward. Dr. King, how long have you been a veterinarian?
51 years.
51 years. So I'm assuming that you are quite aware of how to handle animals respectfully.
Absolutely.
You would consider yourself an expert.
I've been on many national and international animal welfare committees over the years.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm just going to get into the investigations that were brought forward and that's some of the allegations, right? The investigation that came forward, that was done by the Animal Welfare Services of Ontario, correct?
Yeah, Michael Draper.
Yes. And I don't know if you remember, but when we were speaking with the manager, and I know that when I spoke with Mr. Cookett, there were some allegations against the SPCA, but the SPCA isn't, we don't have the authority to investigate ourselves. So the SPCA told the CAO's office that they need to, if there's any allegations against the SPCA regarding animal cruelty, that it needs to be brought forward to Animal Welfare Services. You remember that, Mr.?
Yes.
Yes. And that's what the SPCA did, is they told the town of Fort Erie, if there's animal cruelty, then the people that are making these allegations need to go to the proper authorities. We
Hey,
can't.
Councillor Lubberts, you're making statements as opposed to asking questions.
Thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Now, the use of the drugs, you were saying that the American Veterinarian Society or whatever doesn't recommend them. And you were trying to explain what you meant by the difference between the American rules and Canadian rules. Things aren't available in Canada. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So T61 is an authorized chemical in Canada. It's not available in the United States. That's why they don't recommend its use, because it's not available. But it is available in Canada. And if you read the literature on the use of T61, it says that it is comparable to the barbiturates in terms of rendering unconsciousness. Occasionally, in wildlife, they suggest that it may not be, and that they should be sedated first. And that's a relatively new recommendation. And as soon as it was brought to our attention, it was implemented.
Thank you. And we had discussion with the SPCA manager the other day, and we were talking about this specific policy in this report. And the manager, the SPCA manager, said that the investigating officer was surprised that OMAFRA didn't comment on that and the use of the drugs.
Yeah, and the last OMAFRA visit was by one of their, I believe that their veterinary inspectors, was by one of their inspectors in 2018. They visit unannounced once every, usually once every 3 years. We had one in 12, 14, 15, and 18, I think it was, or 14, 15, 17, and 18. When we asked for the reports, they didn't know why we hadn't been inspected in either 19 or 20, but obviously there must not have been any complaints. But in reviewing the literature, it seems that the recommendations around changes to the euthanasia policy may have been brought in since 2018. But I'm not sure of that. But the point is, yes, if there was some reason that if there was some deficiency in our policy, they should have found it, and they didn't.
Yes, thank you very much. And you recall in our conversation as well that the investigating officer did say that these new policies, these new procedures for euthanizing are given to the veterinarians as well. And the veterinarians should have informed the SPCA when the SPCA was purchasing their drugs, that there was other means available and there was other things that were required, right? Not so much required, but used a new drug, you know, to bring more sedation to the animals. And they were surprised that the veterinarians in the town weren't advising the SPCA of these new changes as well.
And that, I haven't checked the records at the SPCA to know how often we buy those drugs, but it may be that the changes were recent. I don't know that for sure. But yes, you're right. It's surprising that the veterinarians wouldn't have advised us if there'd been a suggested change in procedure.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Lubberts?
No, that's fine.
Any other councillors that haven't spoken yet? Then back to you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. King. Does the SPCA contact the veterinarian for every animal that is euthanized?
As far as I know, yeah, there's no euthanasia, other than the wildlife, obviously sick or injured raccoons. But it's always done on the advice of like if it's a cat or a dog.
And in the report that Mr. Draper provided to you and to the SPCA, he says that sedation has not been used in the past and that it's difficult to hit the heart muscle with T61 and that they feel pain while they're dying because sedation really wasn't given to them. And that's why in his report, he's suggesting that that's the route that he should, or that the SPCA should take. My question to you is that you mentioned on several occasions that the law may have changed, but it really is up to the individual corporations to seek out and inform themselves of legislative changes. We all do that. I own my own business. People that I do business with do the same thing. We seek out to learn what the legislative requirements are for our different organizations. Why hasn't the SPCA done that as part of a learning opportunity for themselves? That should be part and parcel of the due diligence process that a corporation has in place for themselves.
We were totally unaware that there was any changes to the recommendations around the use of T61.
I understand that, but don't you think that this is now an opportunity for you to put policies in place to ensure that on an annual basis, your management team seeks out through legal representation what the changes are that would affect your organization and affect the methods that are being used to handle animals that come into the premises?
Fair enough.
Thank you, Your Worship. No further questions.
Anyone else that has any questions of Dr. King? Okay, so I'm going to go, if none of the councillors who haven't asked questions don't have any questions, then I'll go to Councillor Zanko and then I'll go back to Councillor Lubberts. Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. King. Just a question further to some of the answers that you had provided to Councillor Butler. Does the SPCA currently use a board certified veterinarian that's in good standing with the Canadian Veterinarian College?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're practicing veterinarians in Fort Erie.
So, sorry, specifically the SPCA, who the SPCA hires, because you had said that you spend a lot of money with a vet.
The animals are taken to a veterinarian in Fort Erie, yes. Who
is a board certified in good standing veterinarian.
They wouldn't be in practice if they weren't.
Okay. And further to that question, I know in the review by Mr. Draper, there is mention about, and it wasn't an order, it was a suggestion with regard to ensuring that the animal is dead before the animal is moved to the freezer unit. Is there, and I don't know how this works, but does the veterinarian come back to ensure that the animal is dead, or how does that process work?
The veterinarian isn't doing the euthanasia on the animals that Dr. Draper or that Michael Draper was talking about. This was the wildlife, sick raccoons with the ones they were talking about, or fractious cats.
Okay, Your Worship, sorry, if I could just get some clarity on that.
Sure.
So the veterinarian is not involved in the wildlife euthanization, but it is involved in euthanizing of cats and dogs.
As far as I know, they get veterinary advice for that, correct?
So, sorry, Your Worship, further to that, is the veterinarian, are they involved in euthanizing the animal, or I guess what I'm trying to figure out is who euthanizes the animal and ensures the animal is dead? Is it a vet, or is it just a staff member?
If they're done at the shelter, it's a staff member. If they're done at the veterinarian's office, it would be the veterinarian or one of his staff.
Okay.
So just for clarification, if I might, Councillor Zanko,
please.
What is the role of a veterinarian if there's a euthanasia that takes place at the shelter? Is a vet consulted at all? Dr. King?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure you were asking me that question. Yes, as far as I know, there's consultation with veterinarians regarding euthanasia.
All right. Councillor Zanko?
So there's consultation, but I know in this review from Mr. Draper, he's recommending, his words are recommending, that a formal euthanization policy is created, and again, this really isn't my background, so I'm reading this just as he's noting it, but he is alluding to perhaps there might be some uncertainty whether the animal is actually dead before they're put into a freezer unit. What my question is, who confirms that? Is there a veterinarian that comes back to confirm a dog or a cat? I understand wildlife, the vet's not involved, but is there someone that's trained that would come back to ensure that that animal is now deceased before it's moved?
Councillor Lubberts can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that when we talked about this with the shelter manager, the reason that was in the report was because it was not in our policy that somebody would check with a stethoscope to make sure that the heart had stopped. But they were doing it as far as I know, but I don't think it was in the written procedure.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question, Your Worship, and then I promise you I'm done. You had mentioned with regard to the reviews that are conducted, and I've seen the reviews that you provided, thank you. And there has been 2 years that there isn't a review, and I understand, perhaps this year it's due to COVID, but is there a formal review that the board would do to ensure that the facility and, staff are operating in, a compliant manner, rather than just waiting for the surprise inspection from Animal Health and Welfare?
There's an allegation out there that board members do not go to the shelter. One of our board members is in the shelter once every 2 weeks for the past 17 years. She's our treasurer. I go into the shelter on countless basis to sign documents and so on. Our treasurer is in the shelter on a regular basis. So yes, the staff, the directors are in the shelter, and we see how it's operated. We go in there when we're talking about having to do repairs and maintenance. We're in the process of doing some painting. We're in there on a regular basis. So if there was problems with sanitation or other issues, we would be aware of it.
And just further to that, Your Worship, I know I've sat on a number of boards and I've been in offices many times, but I'm actually referring to a facility review similar to this inspection report that you've provided. Is there, what I'm getting at, I'm wondering if there's any type of accountability measures in place to ensure that this list of items like sanitizing and the floors and the food and water and I mean, there's a list. I don't want to waste your time. You've seen that. You've seen this report, but it hasn't been done in 2 years. So my question is, what type of review, a facility review, staff review, is in place to ensure that there's accountability in the interim of these random reports by animal health and welfare?
We don't do a formal review ourselves, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. Okay. Nothing further. Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Mr. King. I appreciate your help.
Mr. Cook, you had your hand up at one point and I'd completely forgotten about you. Was there something that you wanted to add? I mean, ordinarily you wouldn't be participating at this stage, but.
Yes, and I just wanted to just make note of one thing. Councillor Zanko talked about the monthly reports. We do receive those. I caught when that they've been sent over to Town Hall. I spoke to the manager at the SPCA to see where they were going. They were going to staff, not myself and not the director. And those staff assumed that we were getting copies and circulating them. So moving forward, we do now get those monthly reports and will be, and I will circulate them to Mayor and Council. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, that's fine. And that, I think, answers one of the questions that Councillor.
Thank you.
Butler had raised. Okay, Councillor Lubberts. And,
Yes, thank you very much.
just hold on, Councillor Lubberts. I see Councillor Noyes has her hand up, so she should be allowed to.
Okay, all right, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Mayor Redekop, and to you, to Mr. King, Dr. King. Dr. King, when I'm listening to all this, I wrote down four points. I'm just wondering if you think that your board would, if they're not in place now, would consider putting them in place and perhaps, allowing council to have some input. A euthanasia policy which would include the tracking of the animals that are put down, a complaint process, training of staff, including just what the training requirements are for someone to be working in your facility and in regards to their duties. And that's important not just for the animal care, but also for the workers' care, so they know the proper handling of the animals, and a maintenance checklist. That's kind of what I'm trying to kind of bring it down to some really basic things. Now, I'm not sure, you may have some of these policies in place or you may not, but would you be willing to consider these policies?
Yeah, I've made notes. Yeah, I've made notes and I'll take that back to the board.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Thank you, Mr. King. As far as you're getting a lot of questions about policies that need to be put in place with the SPCA. And I'm not sure if you remember our conversation with the manager. But our conversation the other day, we did bring up the report from Mr. Draper. And I asked the manager if she had put in place a policy for the staff and a proper and training for the staff. And she has indicated that it has been done and that she has notified Mr. Draper that that has been done. They've made arrangements with a veterinarian to give staff training. And did you remember that conversation?
Yes, but it's my understanding that was done very shortly after Mr. Draper's visit.
Yes, and you were asked a question earlier about policies as far as how the board receives the complaints and how they proceed with any complaints as far as investigating. And I don't know if you remember, but at one of our previous meetings, since these allegations came forward, I requested that we set up an email on our website that would be directed to the board of directors to handle any complaints, and that all the board members would receive that email, because the big problem was they weren't, the the people that are making these allegations said they didn't have anyone to go to at the SPCA. They didn't know how to contact the SPCA Board of Directors. So do you remember that meeting?
I know we discussed that.
Yes, and I've discussed with the manager, and she has indicated that she's working on that with our technical department. Do you remember that?
I recall something about setting something up.
Okay,
through
thank
the
you.
Computer
Thank
people,
you.
yes.
Yeah, and through you, Mayor Redekop, I just want to make a statement that,
Well, not now. This is a time for you to question the delegates. I've been diligent in trying to make sure the other councilors ask questions. This isn't an opportunity for you to make statements.
I'll
This
make
is an
my
opportunity for
statement later.
questions.
okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions by members of council? If not, Dr. King, I want to thank you for coming out this evening, and it is now 9 o'clock. So I think what we'll do is take a brief 5-minute recess before we proceed then with the balance of the agenda. And Madam Clerk, how do we do that? Do we just stop our video for now?
I would recommend everybody mute their microphones. I'll do a slide presentation to indicate that you're in recess.
Okay, we're back in session. So that takes us at long last to the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone wishes removed from the consent agenda? If there are none, then Councillor Lubberts, you have the motion to approve the items in the consent agenda. You have to unmute. You have to unmute, Councillor Lubberts. Yeah, there you go.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that council approves the consent agenda items as recommended.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to any of the items in the consent agenda? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I have a few. First one is being 2C, the City of St. Catharines Anti-Racism Advisory Committee recommendations regarding, that refers to body cameras. My only question is, I've read the report a few times and I don't see any recommendations or any information about body cameras on there. So I'm in favor of the support. I'm just wondering why it's titled the way it's titled.
Well, it is what it is, and the original report that was sent to the committee may have made reference to body cameras. And all I can tell you is that some of the delegates that appeared at regional council on this issue didn't favor body cameras for whatever reason, but we're only receiving, the recommendation is that we only receive this particular resolution from the City of St. Catharines.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I just thought, okay, I read it. I don't see how body cameras for police officers have anything to do with the report. But anyway, the next one is 2F, again from the City of St. Catharines support the current provincial review and appeal for increased funding in long-term care homes and for additional personal support workers, nurses, and PPE costs. Now, of course, I'm 100% in favor of that. However, I think that they're missing some of the other service providers in long-term care homes, particularly the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, and the recreational therapists. Now the residents are not allowed to leave. Their workload has increased substantially, and without, these are all trained individuals that a personal support worker can't take the place of. And I just wish that they would have included more than just the nursing and the PSW and the PPE in this report, because I think we do need to recognize all the additional help that other workers in long-term care homes are now doing, particularly the socialization. I go to many nursing homes, and the family is many times, for all the right reasons, takes their individuals out, takes them for walks, takes them out for lunch, brings them in something. Now that's all stopped. This falls now to the recreational staff and the physiotherapists and things. So it's unfortunate they were not recognized in this. And the other one was number 3, boards and committee meetings for the Community Gaming Development Corporation, February 25th. I see that your request was declined. I guess you asked a question and they're not going to provide you with the information. And I did have an opportunity to talk to the CAO today. I do apologize to Councillor Dubanow because I didn't have a chance to talk to him today. Now, in regards to the policy from the town, it says that the Community Gaming Corporation is an employee of the town of Fort Erie. I mean, that's pretty basic. So I would think that they do have to answer, at least to the CAO and the mayor, when there's a request or a question to be answered. The other thing too is that in the report, it talks about infractions and things like that, infraction number, first level, second level. With the changes that have occurred over at least in the last, I guess, year and a half, the rules have changed in regards to that. And the committee, the gaming committee really doesn't play a role in this anymore because it's legislated. It's not like, let's say you have 3 organizations, A, B, and C, and they're, let's say they're not in compliance. The committee can't choose to say, well, yeah, we'll make A and B comply, but C will let off the hook. There is no choice. It's now legislated. So there's no reason to even have that part included in the community gaming procedure because it's no longer part of their duties. And with the new rules, and I do think that they need to kind of look at what they still can do and what they can't do with the new rules from it's no longer called the Ontario Lottery Gaming. I can never remember what they're called now, but they have changed the rules and regulations. So the roles have really changed. That's it for my questions.
Yeah, Councillor Noyes, just to follow up on your comment. Yes, the request was denied for confidentiality reasons. I think that there are some issues here that need to be resolved, and that's something that there needs to be some further clarification on. There seems to be some misunderstanding of the relationship between council and the gaming corporation board, which will need to be rectified in some fashion. Any other councillors have any questions or comments? There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the items in the consent agenda? None opposed. That is carried. The next, so then that takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is the report CAO 15/LC05/2020. And Councillor McDermott, you have a resolution with respect to this report?
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Butler that CAO 15/LC05/2020, land matters, June 30th, 2020, special land. Committee meeting minutes, August 6, 2020, land committee minutes, August 18, 2020, special land committee minutes. That council receives the June 30th, 2020, special land minutes attached as Appendix 1 to report number CAO 51/LC05/2020. And further, that council received the August 6, 2020, land committee minutes attached as Appendix 2 to report numbers CAO 15/LC05/2020, and further that council receives the August 18, 2020 special land committee meeting minutes attached as Appendix 3 to report CAO 51 LC 05/2020, and further that council approves the recommendations contained in Appendix 4.
Are there any questions or comments by members of council? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you very much. And just a quick comment. I'm actually very pleased to see that there were some discussions in the minutes about the acquisition of waterfront property to bring into the municipality. That was actually something that the Waterfront Strategy Focus Group, which I was a member of prior to being on council, had brought up the possibility of a land bank where we set money aside for acquisition, or rather strategic acquisition of waterfront property as it becomes available. And I was actually very, very pleased to see some of that, those kind of discussions go on in the land committee minutes. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. In regards to the property next to Waterfront Park, again, I received a phone call yesterday, matter of fact, and gentleman that lives in the area informed me that he heard from a good source that the land was owned by a lady that used to, I don't want to give any names out, but she used to be involved with the Tennis and Yacht Club. Now, I'm hearing from one day the clerk or the CAO said that there was someone from Welland that owned it. And you, Mayor Redekop, said that someone from Toronto owned it. Can we get some clarification on actually who actually owns the property? So
you can. Title is, yeah, you can get some clarification. The title has been searched. The property is owned by a corporation. One of the principals of the corporation used to live in Welland, lives in Toronto now. We've had communication with the owner, and we also know that there are some restrictions with respect to disposition of the property, and we're moving forward with that. So we're not confused about who owns the property. We know who owns the property, and we've had communication with that person.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions or comments with respect to this matter? If none, then I'm going to call the resolution with respect to the land committee minutes. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to new business and inquiries, and the first item relates to the Affordable Housing Committee, and Councillor Butler, you have that resolution regarding Amy Bruning.
That's Your Worship. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council accepts the resignation of Amy Bruning, Fort Erie Native Friendship Center Representative, Fort Erie Affordable Housing Committee, and further that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And Councillor Butler, you have the next resolution, and this is one that calls for us to advise the clerk who our selection is. You all would have received a memorandum with respect to the candidates to fill the one opening on the Fort Erie Affordable Housing Committee. So, Madam Clerk, did you want to poll the councillors then as to whether it's A, B, C, D, or E?
Yes, certainly, Your Worship. If I could start with Councillor Lubberts.
A.
Councillor McDermott.
C.
Councillor Zanko.
Where is she?
Have we lost her?
She's not here.
I don't see her. So maybe we've lost Councillor Zanko.
I'll be right back. For
Did you find her?
contract Digital services,
Okay.
you can find her.
Well, why don't we continue on with your polling and hopefully she'll come back.
Sure. Councillor Butler,
C.
Councillor Dubanow,
C.
Councillor Noyes,
C.
Mayor Redekop,
B.
There she is.
Now, sorry, I'm having to do this from my iPad now, so.
So Councillor Zanko, I don't know if you know where we are. We're at the filling of the vacancy on the Fort Erie Affordable Housing Committee. Councillor, or the clerk has polled all of us with respect to the names contained in the memorandum, and we've advised her either A, B, C, D, or E. If you have the memo available, then you would know who is who.
Yes, I did. I cut out right after Councillor McDermott's
Okay,
report. So, and unfortunately now I'm just working from my iPad, so I don't have the names in front of me. I didn't write down who my choice was as of A, B, or C. I do know who my choice is, but I'm not sure how the clerk wants to handle that.
you don't have access to your email at all on your iPad?
Well, I can. I just you're gonna lose me again. I can turn my video off.
no, you can just, I think, go right to your mail.
Mhm.
Okay.
Isn't it C already? Because there's 4 people voting for C.
Well,
I still need to poll it.
yeah. This is why we don't have mail-in ballots.
You'd be here till 4 a.m. if that's what happened.
Do you know what? And so I'm having trouble finding the email now because there's many of them since that one has come in. Carol, could you just resend me the email again so it's right in front of me?
Okay.
Oh, actually, I think I might have it. I have it now, Carol. My choice is applicant C, please.
So
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm going between two
yep, that's okay.
appointment here.
Councillor.
The successful applicant is Christopher Nutt.
So Councillor Butler, could you proceed then with your resolution to appoint Chris Nutt to the Fort Erie Affordable Housing Committee, please?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council appoints Chris Nutt as a member at large to the Fort Erie Affordable Housing Committee for the period ending November 14th, 2022.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Are there any other items of new business or inquiries? Well, there's one. If would anyone like to move that council supports the extension of the sunset clause in bylaw 106-10 for 1 year at the request of Canadian Motor Speedway? So I've got Councillor Noyes. You're going to move that?
Yes.
And Councillor McDermott, I presume you're seconding. Councillor McDermott, you're seconding that?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, so you had your hand up for that. That's what I presume. Okay, so all we need now is Ms. Dolch, if she's with us, to confirm, and I don't see her, that it is by, oh yes, it is bylaw 106, is it not, for 2010?
Let me just double check, but I believe that's correct. 10610.
Okay, perfect. So Madam Clerk, you have the motion.
Yes, I do, your worship.
Is everybody clear on the motion? Is there any,
Redekop,
yes? Questions or comments?
can you read it?
Yep. Council supports the extension of the sunset clause in bylaw 106-10 for 1 year at the request of Canadian Motor Speedway. I guess maybe we should put for 1 year to September 13th, 2021. Is that agreeable, Councillor Noyes?
Yes.
Councillor McDermott, I see you're shaking your head.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody clear on the motion? Any questions or comments? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any other inquiries or items of new business? If not, then that takes us to motions, and Councillor Butler, you have
Mayor
a series of
Redekop,
Your
motions.
worship,
Sorry,
have-
did I miss?
we have 2 responses to inquiry, C and D.
Oh, yes, sorry. Sorry, so one relates to an inquiry by Councillor Lubberts, and Ms. Dolch, you have the response to that?
I do. So the nature of the inquiry was Councillor Lubberts conveyed a complaint about overgrown weeds at the Schooley Road subdivision and requested that staff look into the matter. Our response is the town's assumption of these land is not expected for a few more years, meaning the maintenance responsibility is still that of the developers. PDS staff contacted the developer on July 21st relative to the maintenance of weeds and subsequently met with the developer and his consultant on site. Maintenance of the weeds along the stormwater management pond and along existing residential property has been requested. Staff will continue to monitor the site until the weeds have been cut. Staff will also monitor the site in the future.
And Councillor Lubberts?
yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Ms. Stoltz, did they give you a timeline on when they were going to address it?
So thank you, through you to the councillor. My understanding was that it was cut this Saturday. Staff didn't get a chance to go out today to confirm that for me, but we do have an order that's been issued by bylaw staff, and that order expires on August 25th, which is tomorrow. So either way, it will be taken care of.
Okay, I'll drive by there tomorrow. Thank
Will you
you.
let us know, if the grass is cut?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Okay, then the other inquiry was in response to inquiry by Councillor Noyes, and Mr. Jansen, apparently you have a response to that.
I do, yes. So this is further to the inquiry by Councillor Noyes on August 10th. The nature of the inquiry is Councillor Noyes requested a copy of the questionnaire that was sent to all gaming recipients, along with the mechanism that was used to score them. The staff response is the gaming centers reopened on July 24th with cabinet game or tap-tix machines, play only, and a limit of 50 customers inside at a time. As revenue begins to slowly trickle back to the charitable and nonprofit organizations, the OLG and OGCA strongly encouraged us to allocate funds based on the financial situation of the organization and community need. We've been asked to defer organizations with less priority to later in the year. For the first 2 months, volunteers are not required to be in attendance at the gaming center, which is to be reassessed after 6 weeks. Since there are no volunteers, there are no unique factors to consider, such as availability of volunteers. A consistent approach and methodology for allocating assignments is provided across all organizations. In order to assist the CGDC Board of Directors to better understand the unique scenarios facing organizations during COVID-19, questionnaires were sent out to all organizations, save and except for schools. Number 1, 3 questions were asked. Program status: have programs increased, running as normal, decreased, or canceled altogether? 2, financial impact: have costs increased or revenue decreased significantly, cost increased or revenue decreased slightly, or has there been minimal impact? 3, cash flow impact if operations continue as is. Will the current cash position sustain operations for 1 to 3 months or less, 3 to 6 months, or 6 months and beyond? And 4, a box was also provided for the organization to provide any relevant information. Section 2, although not included in the survey, organization provided for the organization to provide any relevant information. Although not included in the survey, organizations were scored based on the services they provide to the community. And section 3, organizations that scored between 4 to 8 were considered a low priority, between 9 to 14 were considered to be a medium priority, and between 15 to 19 were considered to be a high priority. And a copy of the survey and matrix is attached to the response.
Thank you, Mr. Jansen. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I was pleased with the survey. I had an opportunity to talk to Grace earlier today, and I was pleased with the survey and the way the format of it. And I do understand, we're talking to Grace, that it's an evolving thing, is that the $29 million that was announced about 2 weeks ago, this survey was actually done prior to that. So again, because one of my questions was the 25 million that's now being allocated to the Trillium is very specific on which organizations can get it and which ones can. I think they, for instance, mental health and food banks can access that funding where perhaps other organizations, not for profit, cannot. So she did indicate that this is going to be an evolving thing, but she did say she was very pleased with the responses from the different organizations, that many of them provided a lot of detail on where their funding was coming from in these COVID times, so to speak. And she was saying they were very informative of like how donations were coming to different organizations and how organizations were helping each other, and the community was supporting the different organizations, understanding the bingo was drying up. So she was very pleased with with the information that was provided. She also said some of the organizations can access the different funding. I think I can't ever remember, is it SERV or whatever, for funding for some of their staff, and so they're accessing that too. And she also says, so what happens if somebody's roof is going to cave in, and they're in dire straits? And she said no organization indicated that there were any that were in dire straits, that they're going to be closing their doors if something didn't happen quickly. So I was pleased to hear that, but that was one of my concerns. But again, it's repeating myself, is that it is evolving. I understand that they will keep track of this, and now that the $29 million has come down, that things may change a little bit for some organizations and not for others. So I was pleased with her response, and I'm glad to hear the community support of the different organizations.
Any other questions or comments on that? Mr. Jansen, I'm just at the bottom of the response is the item, although not included in the survey, organizations were scored based on the services they provide to the community. Were you able to clarify how that was done? And if not, you perhaps Councillor Dubanow would be able to shed some light on that.
No, I don't have that here, Councillor Dubanow. If you do have more information, otherwise I can get back to you with that.
Yeah, just curious. Councillor Dubanow, can you assist me on that?
I think I know what it is, but I would want to double check just to be entirely sure. So perhaps Mr. Jansen.
That's fine. And yeah, well, so the next council meeting, perhaps Mr. Jansen, you can provide a response on that. Okay. If there are no other questions on that, then that takes us to motions, and that takes us to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the first motion, number 1, animal rights and protection, based on our conversation earlier today with the mayor, I have agreed to defer this to allow the staff to devise a report so that we can better analyze what this resolution may look like and what the financial implications might be for the town of Fort Erie itself. But I did want to say that the animal rights and protection has a fine balance where we can incorporate when the staff is looking to write this report, where we can incorporate the safety of animals that are currently in the marketplace. So with that being said, I guess it would be to timing as to how long it would take for the staff to come up with a report with respect to this.
Right. So I think Councillor Butler, the best thing to do would be to put your motion on the floor, and then we could move to defer it to October the 19th, which is about a couple of months from now, to permit staff, the purpose would be to permit staff to prepare a report to give us some advice and information relative to the contents of the motion, and give us some background on potential costs, et cetera. So I think that would be the preferred way to proceed. Do you have a seconder for the motion?
Yes, I do. I do have Councillor McDermott is my seconder.
Okay, so why don't we do that, and we'll do that with, yeah, so let's do that, and then you can move to defer it.
Okay, great. So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott to defer this resolution to permit staff to prepare a report with respect to potential costs.
I'm thinking, and Madam Clerk, maybe you can help me on this. I'm thinking that the motion should be read, put on the record, and then the motion to defer should be read.
That's correct, Your Worship. So if we've got a mover and a seconder to put the motion on the floor, then once it's on the floor, Councillor Butler and her seconder can move to postpone to October 19th, permit staff to provide a report with respect to costs.
Okay, so Councillor Butler, you have to kind of go through all this stuff.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott. Number one, animal rights and protection. Whereas the town of Fort Erie currently does not have a bylaw in place that deals with animal rights, protection, and consideration of worth. And whereas animals have basic interests that deserve recognition, consideration, and protection on both a moral and legal basis. And whereas there is a need to ensure that animals live free from suffering and exploitation. And whereas animals have an inherent worth and as such should be treated with great consideration. And whereas animals that may need care, treatment, or require euthanasia are often not seen by a doctor of veterinary medicine in good standing and board certified with a Canadian Veterinary College. And whereas basic standards of care in accordance with the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act information has not been widely distributed or adopted to be reflective of modern times. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Municipal Council of the Town of Fort Erie directs staff to develop an animal rights and protection bylaw incorporating the Pounds Act RSO 1990 CP 17, Canadian Standards of Care in Animal Shelters in particular, the Guideline for Animal Shelter UC Davis and California revised for Canada, OMAFRA Animals for Research Act RSO 1990 CA 22 for RR0, 1990 Regulation 23 pounds, and further that council directs staff to work with experts in the field that include a doctor of veterinary medicine in good standing with the Canadian Veterinary College, an animal rights lawyer to ensure expert legal advice in advocacy and securement of law.
Thank you, Councillor Butler, and I understand you want to move to postpone this to October the 19th for staff to provide a report to council?
Yes, please.
Okay, and your seconder is Councillor McDermott?
Yes.
Okay, any questions with respect to the timing by any members of council? All those in favor of the motion to postpone? Opposed? Oh, no, sorry. Councillor Dubanow, you have a conflict with respect to this. So that's unanimous. Okay, then that takes us to motion number 2.
Okay, thank you. So moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that the animal control bylaw number 2, whereas the town of Fort Erie currently has a bylaw, namely bylaw number 119-97 as amended, that regulates, restricts, and prohibits the keeping and running at large of dogs in the town of Fort Erie. And whereas bylaw number 119-97 is not reflective of other types of animals, and whereas there is a need to identify a variety of animals that are either domestic or wild to ensure animal rights along with safe and humane handling and care are adhered to, and whereas a pound keeper contracted through the corporation of the town of Fort Erie is given recovery expense relief associated with impounding both domestic and wild animals in the form of annual compensation. And whereas the current agreement with the SPCA appoints the Fort Erie SPCA as the authorized license agent. And whereas the current bylaw needs to be amended and reflective of modern times and encompass other animal species. Now therefore be it resolved that the Municipal Council of the Town of Fort Erie directs staff to modernize and update the animal control bylaw to be reflective of all animal types, both domestic and wild, to ensure safe animal harbor, handling and protection. And further, that council directs staff to integrate the animal rights and protection bylaw once developed into the animal control bylaw to be more reflective of modern day realities. So
Councillor yeah, is this, you're going to move to postpone this as well?
This one as well for October 19th, and direct staff to provide a report with respect to costs associated with this as well. And the only reason I'm deferring this one is because it makes sense since we're deferring the first one.
Right. Okay, and Councillor McDermott, are you seconding that?
Yes.
Okay, so any questioning with respect to the timing, October the 19th? If none, all those in favor of the motion to postpone? None opposed, so that is carried. That then takes us to motion number 3, Councillor Butler.
Yes, I will not be deferring this one. Moved
No,
by myself,
understood.
seconded by Councillor McDermott. New animal control contract. Whereas the corporation of the town of Fort Erie entered into a contract with the Fort Erie SPCA on May 24th, 2019, commencing June 1st, 2019. And whereas the contract is set to end on May 31st, 2022. And whereas the current contract with the SPCA fails to enforce the municipality's right to audit physical premises, impound to intake information, health and safety, procedural policies, veterinary visits, care of animals, and disposal of animals. And whereas the current contract also does not allow for the town of Fort Erie to conduct investigation into complaints or allegations towards a contracted entity. And whereas the SPCA has not provided detailed information regarding the qualifications, training, and certification of staff tasked with euthanizing animals, animal control complaints and outcomes, animal intake, including care control, veterinary care, and outcomes, nor distinguishing between humane society activities and animal control activities. And whereas the current contract does not include a system in which the town can accurately measure deliverables, and whereas the current contract was single sourced rather than posted for bids, and whereas animal control costs may not currently be reflective of the real costs associated with the work performed, and whereas the town now has an opportunity to revamp its animal control services agreement to modernize and implement measures that would be reflective of the animal rights and protection measures. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Municipal Council of the Town of Fort Erie directs staff to examine the current animal control services agreement in preparation of the 2022 open bid date so that changes can be made to include animal rights and protection, revamped animal control bylaw, and reflective of better deliverables, and rewritten to offer more control for inspection and rights to the Town of Fort Erie to ensure that professional, ethical, moral care and control of animals are followed. And further, that council directs staff to conduct a financial analysis in comparison to ensure that the amount provided in the contract is reflective of the financial burden expenses to carry out the duties on an annual basis. And further, that council directs staff to examine the SPCA's policy and procedures with respect to animal control services, qualifications for those tasked with the services, compliance of safe handling, care, and control of animals brought in, and further, that the contract be placed on an open bid system in 2022 rather than single source for competitive advantages and opportunities.
And did you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Butler?
I'm not at this moment. I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay. Mr. Cook, I understand that you've had an opportunity to review this and there's been some staff investigation into this already.
Yeah, to your worship, I think we're all in agreement that the current agreement that we have with the SPCA is vague and needs to be revised. And this is something that we can get working on now. We've got staff looking into it. We're going to do some benchmarking of what other municipalities are doing, look at their agreements and so forth. We'll bring that back so that come May of 2022, well in advance, we'll have a report with agreement that council can review prior to us putting out a formal tender or RFP for these services. So I think this is overdue, and I'm in agreement with revising the current agreement.
Okay, any members of council wish to speak to this? Councillor Lubberts, and then Councillor Noyes, and then Councillor Zanko.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. I'm not muted, am I?
Nope, you're good. We can hear you.
I just think there needs to be a couple of changes as to the wording here. And the third, 1, 2, 3, fourth whereas, it says where the SPCA has not provided detailed information. And I think Mr. Cook had mentioned earlier that the SPCA has been sending reports to the town, but they were sent to staff and they weren't circulated. So I just need to verify with Mr. Cookett and Mr. Jansen and Ms. Dolch that they're receiving the information that the SPCA has been required to give them on a regular basis, and that they have no problems with the SPCA as far as any information that they request. The SPCA provides them with that information.
So Councillor Lubberts, if I go to not the fourth, but the fifth whereas, which is at the very bottom of page 7 of our agenda.
Yes.
This says has not provided detailed information regarding the qualifications, training, and certification of staff with euthanizing animals. Doesn't make reference to
animal control complaints, animal intake, control, care, outcomes, nor distinguishing between humane and activities and animal control activities. Those reports are provided.
Okay. Mr. Cookett, just reiterate again what it is that you receive from the SPCA. There is some of this information referred to in the monthly minutes that we receive, but what is it specifically that you're receiving that you're now going to be forwarding to members of council?
Through your worship, exactly what Councillor Lubberts just stated, but we do not receive the first part of this whereas, where it's detailed information regarding qualifications, training, certification of staff, tasked with euthanizing animals. So that information we're not receiving. We are receiving the other information, and that's what we'll start to forward to Mayor and Council.
Well, okay, no, that's not sufficiently clear to me. So are you getting information about animal control complaints?
No.
You're getting animal.
But then I don't know if they're receiving any.
Okay, are you receiving information relative to animal intake, including care, control, veterinary care, and outcomes?
Yes.
Okay, and so then members of council will be getting that going forward.
Correct.
And that's been supplied by the SPCA in the past.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and what about information distinguishing between Humane Society activities for which we don't pay and animal control activities for which the town of Fort Erie does pay?
I'll have to double check. Maybe Councillor Lubberts knows if that's part of that monthly update. I can't recall, to be honest with you. I don't have it in front of me.
Yes, Mayor Redekop, in the report, when we have complaints, right? The SPCA marks in the complaints, and then they're broken up if they're animal control or Humane Society.
And that's provided to town staff, to your knowledge?
Yeah, I'm assuming that it went to bylaw. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it was going to Jeff Stevenson. But I'm not. Don't quote me on that. But
Ms. Dolch, would you know anything about this?
Through you to the councillor. Yes, that's correct. It was going to Jeff Stevenson. We have now notified that Paul has taken his place. So Paul is also getting a copy now.
And that is information relative to complaints and relative to animal control and humane society activities?
Yeah, it's related. We get information on how many calls, how many dog licenses versus violation tickets, things like that. Yes.
All right, so Councillor Lubberts, what is it you're suggesting with respect to this particular whereas?
Well, I just think that it needs to, I just wanted to make sure that it was noted as a public record that the SPCA is providing the departments of the town of Fort Erie information that they require and they request.
Okay.
If there's any other information that they request, the SPCA never has a problem with providing it to them.
Okay, did you have anything further with respect to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. The first that, it's a little confusing as to what we're going to do here. You want to revamp the animal control bylaw, and you also want to strengthen the services agreement, but it says that they want to integrate them, and I'm not too sure that that's what we want to do. If we're integrating the services agreement is done by, the service agreement is done by a separate entity. We hire somebody to execute our animal control bylaw. And to integrate the contract with the bylaw, to me sounds ambiguous because you're defeating your purpose. You got one entity that you're hiring to enforce your laws. And I think the service agreement is completely different because that goes out to tender. The animal control bylaw doesn't go out to tender. That is our bylaw. So I think we need to make sure that we're not integrating the two of them and making them one document. I think everyone understands what I'm saying.
Well, you're referring to the last paragraph of motion number 2, which talks about integrating the animal rights and protection bylaw once developed into the animal control bylaw. And then this makes reference to those, the new agreement taking into account animal rights and protection. So I know what you're saying, but I've heard what the CAO has said. The CAO seems to be comfortable with moving forward to try to put together a bylaw that will take into account a number of things, some of which we haven't deliberated on yet because we haven't deliberated on the first 2 motions, which deal with things that will have to be taken into account when a new contract is entered into with either the local SPCA or some other entity. So to some extent, Councillor Lubberts, I think you're anticipating something that hasn't happened yet, but will happen, and you'll have an opportunity. I think some of your concerns maybe are going to be more directed to the first 2 motions. I'm thinking. So if you've got a suggestion as to how you might want to amend this, we can put it on the floor, but I'm thinking that it's fairly clear to me, and I think the CAO is clear on what we're looking to do here.
Well, if it's clear that we're going to keep it separate, but then I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we shouldn't be mixing the 2 of them together.
Well, I would go so far as to say that I believe that if we were to adopt an animal protection bylaw, which we haven't done yet, but if we were, and if we have an animal control bylaw, those will be the foundations upon which an animal control agreement, services agreement will be entered into. So there would have to be some reference back to those foundational documents. But they wouldn't be part of the service agreement.
Yeah, all
They
right,
would be the foundation for the agreement, though.
okay.
Okay.
All right, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm good with the strengthening the agreement.
Okay, so then, are there any other questions or comments? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Councillor
no, I
Noyes.
have more, Mayor Redekop.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, all right. The second to last that says council directs staff to examine the SPCA's policies and procedures. Now, if this is going out for tender in 2022, right? I think we need to remove the name SPCA, and we have to examine the policies and procedures of all the people that are bidding on it. Because the SPCA might not get this tender. So you want to look at the SPCA, but what if someone else is bidding on it? Are we not going to inspect their policies as well?
Well, let me go to the mover of the motion and see what was anticipated there. Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Your Worship. You're right. So while Councillor Lubberts makes a good point, this actual that was to take into consideration the current contract and to allow for staff to examine the policies and procedures with respect to animal control services that are currently in place and to make sure that they are compliant on a go-forward basis. And I believe that we have an opportunity to invoke that, do we not, according to our current contract?
Mr. Cookett?
We can if the SPCA is in agreement to.
So it'd be like any other agreement, the parties have to agree.
That's right.
So I would like to see that staff try to get their agreement on that. And if Councillor Lubberts would like, we can add another that doesn't reflect the SPCA, but actually reflects on a go-forward basis, the point that he was trying to make for 2022 contract.
Well, okay, I'm going to go back to Councillor Lubberts then. You have the floor, Councillor Lubberts.
Yeah, well, Mayor Redekop, I understand, but from what I'm looking at here, the motion, right, the resolution, it's titled the new animal control contract. It doesn't say revised in this current, it says a new one. So looks like we're going to put together a new animal control contract or a service agreement, and it's going to go out for tender in 2022.
Your Worship.
Well, if there are some
Now,
amendments.
we can request information from the SPCA regarding their policies, right?
Your Worship, if I may, I'm okay. He makes a good point. It is a new animal control contract. So I'm okay to change that then to take out the SPCA, and I can make a request under notice of motion to direct staff.
So why don't we do this? You've got staff, instead of direct staff to examine, direct staff to request a review with the SPCA of its policies and procedures, et cetera.
Sure.
Mayor Redekop.
Well, then here's what we'll do, Councillor Lubberts. You tell us what you want to do with this particular substantive provision of the motion, and then we can put a motion on the floor if you get a seconder, and we'll vote on it. Let's do that.
What I'm seeing here is that's the problem and the point that I made earlier. You're trying to integrate two things into one. You want to make a new contract, yet in this here motion, you're also reviewing the old contract. So I think that what we need is we need a motion to provide, to direct staff to put together a new animal control services agreement. And then you need a motion to direct staff to review the current agreement with the SPCA and look at their policies. But we got this one is mixed with everything. It's got both of it in it. I'm not trying to be difficult here, but we're a council, right? And we need to make sure that what we present is right and it's accurate. And I don't know that we're doing this right. We're integrating two things into one motion. And I think it needs to be separated out, right? If we want to take a short recess and work on it, but I can't support it the way it is.
Well, that's fine. So tell us how you want it.
Having a stronger service agreement and having it strengthened for both parties.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Councillor Butler comment, and then we're gonna decide what we're gonna do next. Councillor Butler?
Your worship, I'm fine with doing exactly that. As I mentioned earlier, we can just leave this as that, change it to council direct staff to request policy and procedures with respect to animal control and leave the SPCA completely out of it so that it is reflective of the new contract. And then I will bring forward a new motion under notice of motion to be reflective of the SPCA and what we'd like to do. However, having said that, I am not comfortable with removing anything from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth, whereas, if we can go back to that, I'm not comfortable with removing that until I see proof of that report.
You haven't been asked to do that. So, all right, so if your seconder is in agreement, then it would be a friendly amendment. The council directs staff to request policies and procedures with respect to animal control services, et cetera.
Yes, as long as these are going to be requested by the other parties that bid on the contract.
That would be the context if there's no reference to the SPCA.
Right.
So your seconder was Councillor McDermott?
Yes.
You in agreement with that, Councillor McDermott?
I don't have a problem with that, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Lubberts, you're back to you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm supportive of a stronger contract. That doesn't bother me at all, and I'm glad to see that if we're going to look at, we got to examine everybody that's bidding on it. They're going to be subject to the examinations as well.
They would be. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. A lot of what I was going to say has been said. And I don't want to minimize anyone's concerns because I understand the passion regarding this issue, because we've all been provided with a lot of information that is really, troubling, to say the least. But I wonder if we're perhaps overreaching in some of this, and that we're kind of forgetting that it's not just the SPCA and the town of Fort Erie, that there's levels of government and governing laws and acts that basically are there to protect the animals and their rights. And it kind of sounds like we're kind of stepping on that territory. Like, for instance, the fourth, whereas the current contract also does not allow the town of Fort Erie to conduct investigations into complaints, allegations towards a contracted entity. Well, I don't know if we want to. I don't know if we have the skill set to do that, but what we always have, and we still and currently do, have the ability to bring our concerns to the governing bodies outside, that govern the SPCA and other entities like that. And again, where the SPCA has not provided detailed information, the fifth whereas is that they don't need to at this point. It's not part of the contract, and we don't necessarily request that kind of information from other service providers in different areas that provide service to the town. However, we are dealing with animals, so it's a bit different. I think that whatever contract we come up with, I think we really have to address and recognize the other bodies that are involved with this, the other Ontario rules and regulations, and the College of Veterinarians and things like that. They have rules and regulations that have to be followed, and whatever contract we come with, they have to be referred to, and we have to make sure that we're not kind of trying to usurp their authority, because we just don't have the skill set to do that. I was pleased to hear Dr. King agree that he was going to at least bring to the board our requests for a number of things, everything from the training to the complaint process, and there is 5 altogether. And he was in agreement to bring that to the board. And I think if the board follows through with that and agrees to that, I think most of what Councillor Butler has asked for is going to be provided. And so I will support this motion, because I do think that's going to come, and I think it's done in the best interest of everyone. But I don't want us to forget that there's a lot more in this than just the town of Fort Erie and the SPCA. There's other safeguards put in place that perhaps we're not accessing. That's all.
Any other councillors? Okay, before I go back to Councillor Lubberts, Councillor Zanko, did you put your hand up, or are you just adjusting?
Yes, I did. I
Okay.
put my hand up.
Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to seek some clarity. So when I'm referring to complaints, and I know I asked Dr. King about this during his delegations, and he had said that the board never has received any complaints pertaining to animal care at the SPCA or the facility. But I want to clarify, because Ms. Dolch said that we do receive a report every month on complaints. I'm assuming those complaints are residents calling in that there's a loose dog or there's a raccoon. We have never seen an actual report of residents having concern about the facility itself or the care. Is that correct?
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to the councillor, that's correct. It's just the complaints from residents regarding animal care.
Okay. And further, Your Worship, if I could, I do support Councillor Butler's motion. I think it was eye-opening for me with the complaints that we received and the group that has come forward, because I can tell you that if that hadn't taken place, I would have never been privy to this review from Mr. Draper. And the allegations, I know they're allegations, but they're rather serious. This review, some of the things that are mentioned, very serious. And I think that it's just our duty, whether they're factual or not factual, it's our duty to investigate this. So I do commend Councillor Butler on bringing this forward. And I'm hopeful, I am hopeful that Dr. King does bring the suggestions back to the board, and that there's some sort of accountability measures put in place immediately, because I know that, there's many of us that are here tonight that have received many complaints over the past 4 years. So if the board hasn't, my feeling is that maybe, and it's common. I mean, it's very common when you sit on a board to not actually know what is going on a day-to-day basis. And I feel as though if there could be some accountability measures in the immediate future, that might provide a lot of residents that have concern a level of comfort, for sure. And
Any other?
that's all I have.
Sorry. Are we finished, Councillor Zanko?
I am, yes.
Okay. Any other councillors before I go back to Councillor Lubberts? I'm sorry, Councillor Butler.
So
Councillor
myself, yes? Oh, okay. So I just wanted to say that I appreciate Councillor Noyes' comments, and I just wanted to say that I haven't lost sight that there are organizations out there that have some oversight responsibilities with respect to investigations. My hope is that the staff that can provide a framework for the investigations that we can launch if things that are brought to our attention haven't been addressed.
Well, I think we'll look to see what staff comes back with. We'll have another opportunity to take a look at this. And then we can make further comments and critiques.
Right.
Anything further, Councillor Butler?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Just in regards to the complaints received, I'm council's representative on the SPCA board. And when the first complaints were brought forward with the two dogs, Storm and Oreo, the lady that was bringing forward the complaints contacted me. And we had some telephone conversations and we discussed the issue. I told her that I would go to the board, discuss it with the board, right? And so I did my part, I did my due diligence, and I looked into this matter. But there's been a whole lot of allegations out there. And I'm hearing of all these phone calls that other councillors are getting. And Mayor Redekop, I can tell you that as of Sunday, right, I received 2 phone calls. I'd never received one phone call from a councillor regarding the SPCA and the allegations against the SPCA. I had short conversation with Anne-Marie Noyes, Councillor Noyes. I had some discussion with our CAO. I mentioned a few things to you, Mayor Redekop, about it, but no one called the councillor that represents the SPCA. And I find that very disturbing that the only conversation I had was with Councillor Noyes. But there's all kinds of phone calls going out there. And none of them are being directed to me. I received a phone call the other day from a gentleman in Crescent Park. The first thing I asked him, have you talked to Councillor Zanko? Right? Because I was going to refer him. He already talked to Councillor Zanko, so I listened to what he had to say. But nobody transferred anything over to me. Not one councillor discussed it with me. And I find that very disturbing, Mayor Redekop. But I just want everyone to know that this is what goes on. I would like to know why the other councillors didn't contact me. Why you didn't want to hear the SPCA side of the story. Because I can tell you, Mayor Redekop, that the stories that were written in Facebook in the beginning, the whole story wasn't being told. That's all I have to say, Mayor Redekop. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Okay, so I'm gonna let you speak, Councillor Butler. This is the 3rd time and it is your motion. So I'll let you speak.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I want to clarify to the general public the statement that Councillor Lubberts has put out there that it's false. We went directly to the CAO, who is in charge of the corporation, and we brought these allegations many months prior to this to have him take over the investigation and to ask the questions of the SPCA and to include you in those discussions. We brought it to his attention, which is perfectly within our rights. I can go on and say a number of different things, but I won't because I'm professional. So I'll leave it alone at that. And further to that, if I may, this motion has not brought up Storm and Oreo. You brought that up. And I'd like to stick to the motion at hand and not get into the allegations that were brought up. If we can do that and move on, I would be very grateful, Your Worship.
All right, so we are going to move on. I just wanted to make one point clear. The motion does refer to single source. I just want to make it clear to the public that it was single sourced. after a process and approved by council. So it wasn't something that was done by staff. It was something that was done by council in, I believe, 2015. 2019, might have been 2019. The years all seem to be going by. Okay, so we have the motion on the floor. We've had a healthy, lengthy debate. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of Councillor Butler's motion, raise your hand.
Did we make changes to it? As amended, right?
That boat has just sailed because we're now voting on this. And I'm sorry, the amendment.
As amended.
No, that was a friendly amendment. That was a friendly amendment, so it's the motion. That's it, the paragraph, the third substantive paragraph, that was a friendly motion, friendly amendment, so it's part of the motion. It's not an amended
And it's
motion.
removed.
All those in favor, I've seen, put your hands back up again. Opposed? Okay, that is carried. That then takes us to notice of motion, and Councillor Butler, you wanted to bring a motion to request that the CAO engage in discussions with the SPCA to provide certain information, what have you. Did you want to give us your?
But I see the clerk's hand up.
We just
The
need
clerk-
a motion to extend the hour of adjournment. We're past 10,
Oh, geez.
Oh, do we have to?
where you moved on.
Councillor McDermott, are you moving that we extend?
I really
used to-
should. but I'm
I used to
gonna
like you.
have- Sorry about that, your worship.
We have to have a seconder.
I'll second it.
Okay, Councillor Dubanow, good for you. All those in favor? Okay, I go along because all of you are. Okay, Councillor Butler, just give us just briefly what it is, and will it be for next month?
Yes, it will.
Okay,
And it's briefly just to request policies and procedures with respect to animal services.
from the SPCA.
From the SPCA, yes, I apologize.
Okay, and so so that will be returnable. Madam Clerk, the regular council meeting in September is
Is September 21st.
September 21st it is. Okay. Any other notices of motion? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Considering the changes in the gaming industry legislation, which impacts the rules of community gaming and the town of Fort Erie, that there is a need to update and review the town of Fort Erie's gaming policy and the gaming corporation's relationship and their policies and bylaws be reviewed.
Okay, and when is that returnable?
I'm open to suggestions.
Well, it's your motion. You tell us
No,
when you.
I just don't know how, if
All right, so you need to put together the motion. And if you can do that at a regular council meeting, we have one on September the 21st, we have one in October.
Okay.
You pick the date.
Okay, I can go. The reason I'm hesitant to pick a date is because we haven't had a chance to touch base with the gaming corporation, see what day and time they would have. What would work best for them? Okay, so I'll say September 21st, 2020.
You can always defer that if
Exactly.
it's appropriate. Okay, any other notices of motion? Then that takes us to consideration of bylaws. Are there any bylaws that anyone wishes removed from the package? If not, then Councillor Noyes, you have the resolution for first and second reading of the bylaw package.
Okay. Yes, Mayor Redekop. I need a seconder. Moved by myself and seconded by.
I'll second that.
Zanko. I've got Zanko.
Okay.
Okay, Zanko. Oh, good. Seconded by Councillor Zanko, that the bylaw package containing 77/2020 to exempt certain lots in Plan 59M 452 from part law control, Block 4, 228 and 232 Alderson Court, Park Lane Home Builders Limited, in brackets J Hill, 78/2020 to authorize entry into an extension and amending agreement with Tamajaka Incorporated for the provision of conventional public transit service. 79-2020 to rename a traveled portion of Cluck Street to Cluck Street North. 80-2020 to rename an untraveled road from Clarkson Crescent to Beach Walk Crescent and to rename an untraveled road from Clarkson Court to Loganberry Court. 81-2020 to assume primary services in the Village Creek subdivision phase 2, stage 2, plan 59M-39 in brackets 800547 Ontario Limited, Deborah Hill. 82-2020 to assume secondary services in the Village Creek subdivision phase 2, stage 2, plan 59M-390 in brackets 800547 Ontario Limited, Deborah Hill. 83-2020 to assume primary services in the Village Creek subdivision phase 3, stage 1, plan 59M-438 in brackets 800547 Ontario Limited, Deborah Hill. Bylaw 84-2020 to accept and declare lands as a public highway on the west side of Concession Road in brackets 0 Concession Road 2685235 Ontario Limited, Frank Renda. 85-2020 to appoint Mark Schmidt as Deputy Fire Chief for the town of Fort Erie and to repeal bylaw number 80-2017. 86-2020 to assume primary services in the Ridgeway by the Lake subdivision, phase 3, stage 1, in brackets plan 59M-418 in brackets 1923286 Ontario Incorporated, Alfred Bean. Resolution number, okay. Turning the page, 87-2020 to assume primary services in the Ridgeway by the Lake subdivision, phase 3, stage 2, in brackets plan 59M-418 in brackets 1923286 Ontario Limited, Alfred Bean. 88-2020 to assume secondary services in the Ridgeway by the Lake subdivision, phase 3, phase 1, stage 1, plan 59M-418 in brackets 1923286 Ontario Incorporated, Alfred Bean. 89-2020 to assume secondary services in the Ridgeway by the Lake subdivision, phase 3, stage 2, plan 59M-418 in brackets 1923286 Ontario Incorporated, Alfred Bean. 90-2020 to deem a certain registered plan of subdivision not to be a registered plan of subdivision. Tanya Marie Cullen, 3761 Dishart Street, is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That bylaw package is on the floor for questions or comments. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. In regards to assuming the secondary services and things like that, can we then assume that the grade law, the grading is in place in that? Like we're basically taking over. It's no longer developers GC. So I'm just wondering, are we sure that the grading has all taken place? Is that necessary before we assume the services?
Mr. Walsh, I see that I think it's your certificate on this, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So the process is that we do, in cooperation with our planning department, we do a final inspection of the subdivision. Log grading or rear yard swales, more importantly, are certified during the primary stage much earlier. So unless we've had complaints through bylaw or neighbor complaints come in, we assume that the backyards are still set to grade. There is covenant over the grade, so if it is messed up in some form or another, we have the opportunity to correct it in the future.
Councillor Noyes?
Okay, well, that's good to hear, because I know one of my biggest complaints that I'm getting is the problem with the grading, with the swales being filled in and things like that. And what the residents are telling me is that when they put in a complaint or express a concern to the town, they're told, well, we can't do anything because, you know, it's not our responsibility anymore type thing. And so they don't feel that they have any place to go to.
They're not hearing that from myself, and I doubt that they're hearing that from Ms. Dolch.
Councillor Noyes, I can tell you that I've been involved in a number of complaints over the years where, in fact, the swales within subdivisions have been blocked by people putting in gardens and whatever. And if it interferes with the drainage, they have to remove them so that the residents, if you're getting those types of complaints, make sure you pass that on to Mr. Walsh, because there is in fact something the town can do.
Well, I can assure you that I have not passed them on to Mr. Walsh, but I have talked to two other members of staff, and I've been told that it's a neighbor-to-neighbor issue, and if the neighbor has a problem with it, it is a, what do they call it? They can sue.
So they're misunderstanding that, and in any event, as a counselor, your conduit would be the CAO or the director. They can give you much more accurate information. Any other questions or comments before we go to the third and final reading? Then Councillor Dubanow, I believe you have the resolution for third and final reading of the bylaw package.
Yeah, I do, Your Worship. Councillor Noyes, do you want to second this?
Sure.
All right. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Noyes, that bylaws 77-2020, 78-2020, 79-2020, 80-2020, 81-2020, 82-2020, 83-2020, 84-2020, 85-2020, 86-2020, 87-2020, 88-2020, 89-2020, and 90-2020 are given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any further questions or comments with respect to the bylaws in the package? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Zanko, you have the motion for first and second reading of the confirmatory bylaw?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. And Councillor Dubanow, did you want to second this?
I'd be happy to, Councillor Zanko.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that bylaw number 91-2020 to confirm the actions of council at its council and committee meeting held on August 10th, 2020, and council meeting held on August 24th, 2020 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And third and final reading of the confirmatory bylaw, Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott. That bylaw number 91-2020 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? That is carried. Before we go to scheduling of meetings, now that we have formally passed the bylaw to appoint Mark Schmidt as the deputy fire chief, I want to congratulate Mark and welcome him to his new position, which starts next month. And I want to compliment the fire chief for making such a good selection. Well done. Okay, scheduling of meetings. No one has any meetings coming up? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Corporate and Community Services Subcommittee meeting is meeting this Wednesday at 4 p.m. through Zoom.
Okay, that's August the 26th, 7th, 6th?
Right, 26th,
Okay. And the time again, sorry?
4 p.m.
Any other meetings? If not, then I'm going to check and see who has the motion to adjourn this evening. Councillor Dubanow, how did you do that?
Of course. Councillor McDermott, would you be happy to second this mercifully?
I think so. I think it's
All right. Perfect. So moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council adjourns at 10:31 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on September 21st, 2020.
Okay, team, don't let me down. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, all.